Everyone thinks they know what happened the night my stepmother claimed I attacked her. They saw the photos of her bruises, read the viral post about her violent stepdaughter, and heard my father call me unstable. But they did not know another camera was recording everything. During a family dinner to discuss my grandfather's will, he simply pressed play, shattering the lie she had spent nearly 10 years constructing. My name is Alexis Sanders. I am 29 years old, and I make my living watching people. As a user experience researcher for Northline Insight Studio in Denver, my entire career is built on observation. I sit behind one-way mirrors or stare at data streams, analyzing why people click where they click, why they hesitate, and what frustrates them. I am paid to notice the subtle twitches of annoyance, the unspoken desires, and the patterns in human behavior. It is a bitter irony, then, that for nearly a decade, the people closest to me refused to see what was happening right in front of their faces. To the world, I was the problem. To the quiet, tree-lined streets of my hometown and the well-dressed congregation at my father's church, I was the volatile daughter. I was the one who could not regulate her volume. I was the one who was too intense, too dramatic, and simply too much. They believed this because Patricia told them so, and Patricia Hale, with her soft cardigans and her voice that never rose above a melodic hum, was the kind of woman people instinctively trusted. She was the grieving widower's savior. She was the saint who took on a difficult teenage stepdaughter. They saw the photos of her bruised arm. They read the long, heart-wrenching Facebook posts she wrote about living in fear of my outbursts. They heard my father, Thomas Sanders, shake his head and apologize for my behavior, saying I had always been difficult. But they did not know about the camera mounted on the neighbor's porch. I live alone now in a one-bedroom apartment in Aurora Heights. It is a 40-minute commute to the office, but I like the distance. The walls here are painted a soft, neutral gray, and the space is meticulously organized. My friends call it minimalist. My therapist would probably call it a trauma response. I keep my life small. I keep my voice down, even when I'm alone, watching a comedy on Netflix. If a laugh bubbles up in my chest, a real, guttural, loud laugh, I catch myself clamping a hand over my mouth, looking around an empty room as if waiting for the reprimand. The ghost of that reprimand has haunted me since I was 18 years old. My mother died when I was 16. Her death was a jagged tear in the fabric of my universe, a wound that refused to close. My father and I drifted through the house like two ghosts, silent and hollow. But grief has a shelf life for some people, and for my father, that shelf life was exactly 2 years. When I was 18, Thomas Sanders introduced me to Patricia Hale. She seemed perfect. She was a widow herself, bringing along a son, Eli, who was a year younger than me. Patricia was everything my mother was not. Where my mother had been chaotic, artistic, and loud, filling our house with music and paint and shouting matches that ended in hugging, Patricia was composed. She was a woman of structure. She valued decorum above oxygen. She went to church every Sunday, sat in the third pew, and obsessed over words like polite, demure, and quiet. It happened fast. She moved in, and suddenly the air in the house changed. It became thinner, harder to breathe. Patricia appointed herself the keeper of order. Her mission, it seemed, was to sand down my rough edges until I was smooth, flat, and silent. I remember the first Thanksgiving after the wedding. It is burned into my memory with the clarity of a high-definition film. We were seated around the dining table, which Patricia had set with a runner and centerpieces that looked like they belonged in a magazine. The turkey was dry, but nobody said a word. Eli was telling a story about his soccer team, and my father was nodding along, desperate for this new family unit to work. Then, I made a mistake. I told a joke. It was not dirty or mean. It was just a silly anecdote about a teacher at school who had walked into a glass door. I got to the punchline, and I laughed. It was my mother's laugh, big, booming, and unrestrained. Under the table, a hand clamped onto my wrist. It was not a gentle touch. It was a vice grip, Long, manicured fingernails dug into the soft flesh of my inner wrist, piercing the skin. The pain was sharp and sudden, stealing the breath from my lungs. I froze, my laugh dying in my throat, and looked at Patricia. Her face had not changed. She was still smiling at Eli, her expression serene, masking the violence happening beneath the tablecloth. She leaned slightly toward me, barely moving her lips, and whispered so low that only I could hear. "Do you ever learn to shut your mouth?" The venom in her voice was cold, precise, and terrifying. I yanked my hand away, rubbing the crescent-shaped indentations her nails had left. When I looked at my father, he was busy carving more turkey. Oblivious, or perhaps he was choosing to be oblivious. That was the beginning. Over the next few years, Patricia systematically restructured our reality. Our casual Sunday football games were replaced by formal dinners at the homes of her church friends. Our chaotic, joyful Christmases were traded for stiff, polite gatherings at a cabin belonging to her relatives, people who looked at me like I was a stain on the carpet. I was slowly demoted. In my own home, I became the help, while Eli, the golden boy, the athlete, the one who knew how to smile and nod, sat in the living room with the guests. I was ushered into the kitchen. "Alexis, come help me with the gravy," Patricia would say, her voice sugary sweet in front of an audience. "You know how clumsy you can be. I do not want you breaking anything out there." So I would stand over the sink, scrubbing pots while laughter drifted in from the other room. If I tried to join the conversation, Patricia would find a way to cut me down. She never yelled. Yelling would be unseemly. Instead, she used a scalpel. "Oh, Alexis. Honey," she would say after I offered an opinion on a movie or a news story, "you always have to make everything so dramatic. Do you not? Lower your voice. You are giving everyone a headache." The insidious thing about gaslighting is that eventually, you start to do it to yourself. I began to wonder if I really was too loud. Was I obnoxious? Was I taking up too much space? I started to monitor my volume. I started to edit my thoughts before they reached my tongue. I became a researcher of my own family, trying to calculate the exact decibel level that would allow me to exist without being hurt. But it was never enough. My father was the hardest part. Thomas Sanders had been my hero once, but under Patricia's influence, he faded. He became an echo chamber for her complaints. When I would go to him, crying, showing him the way she excluded me or the cruel things she whispered when no one was looking, he would sigh. He looked tired. He looked like a man who just wanted the path of least resistance. "Your stepmother just wants peace, Alexis," he would say, refusing to meet my eyes. "You have to admit, you are a bit loud. You have always been intense. Just try to tone it down for her sake." Tone it down, shrink, disappear. I lasted until I was 26, the day I moved out to Aurora Heights. Patricia stood on the porch with her arms crossed. She did not offer to help carry a single box. To the neighbors, she told them I was running away because I refused to follow her rules, painting me as a rebellious teenager rather than a fully grown woman escaping a toxic environment. I threw myself into my work at Northline. I became excellent at my job because I was desperate for objective truth. Data does not lie. User feedback is recorded and transcribed. In my professional life, things were real. In my personal life, everything was a distortion field generated by Patricia. There was only one person who refused to buy the ticket to her show. Walter Sanders, my grandfather. Grandpa Walter lived in Brookdale Springs, a small town about 1 hour away from the city. He was 82 years old, a retired mechanic with grease permanently etched into his fingerprints and a bullshit detector that was calibrated to perfection. He lived in a small, clutter-filled log house that smelled of cedar and old paper. After I moved out, I started driving to see him every other weekend. It was my sanctuary. At Grandpa Walter's house, I did not have to shrink. I remember one afternoon, sitting on his back porch, drinking iced tea. I had just spent 20 minutes apologizing for ranting about my job, instinctively covering my mouth when I got excited. Walter reached over and patted my knee with his rough hand. "Stop that," he said gruffly. "Stop what?" I asked. "Stop apologizing for existing," he said. He looked me dead in the eye, his gaze sharp under bushy white eyebrows. "You are not too much. Lexi, you are not too loud. You just do not fit with people who want you silent. There is a difference." He was the only one, the only tether I had to sanity, and as it turned out, he was the only one paying attention. From where I sit now, in the safety of my apartment, I can look back at the devastation of the last 6 months with a strange sense of detachment. It feels like I'm watching a movie of someone else's life, but the scars are real. The gap in my resume is real. The friends I lost because they believed the lies are gone for good. I cut off contact with my father and Patricia immediately after that night. For months, silence reigned. I blocked their numbers. I filtered their emails. I refused to engage with the flying monkeys, the aunts and cousins who sent me guilt-tripping messages about family unity and forgiveness. I was done. I was ready to walk away and never look back. I was ready to let them win the narrative if it meant I could keep my peace. But Grandpa Walter was not done. He was the one who called me last week. He was the one who told me he was summoning the family. He framed it as a dinner to discuss the early distribution of his assets, a conversation about his will. He knew that greed was the only force powerful enough to bring Patricia to the table. She would never come for reconciliation, but she would drive through a blizzard for a check. I did not want to go. The thought of sitting at a table with them again made bile rise in my throat, but Walter asked me to trust him. He said he had invited everyone, my father, Patricia, Eli, and even the church friends Patricia tried so hard to impress. "Why?" I had asked him on the phone, my hand shaking as I held the receiver. "Why put us in a room together? Grandpa? They ruined my life. They humiliated me." "Because," Walter had said, his voice steady and cold as steel, "a lie can run around the world before the truth has got its boots on. But eventually, the truth catches up, and I think it is time we helped it along." He did not tell me about the video then. He did not tell me about the investigation he had been conducting from his attic. He just asked me to show up and hold my head high. What I know now, and what I wish I could tell the terrified woman I was 6 months ago, is that the physical slap Patricia gave me was the least of the violence she committed. The bruise on my cheek faded in a week. The bruise on my reputation, the systematic dismantling of my character, the way she weaponized my emotions against me, the way she turned my father into a stranger, that was the real assault. The beating was just the crescendo. It was the inevitable explosion of a pressure cooker she had been tending for 10 years. I am looking at the calendar on my wall. It has been 3 days since the dinner at Grandpa's house. My phone has been ringing non-stop, but this time, I am not afraid to look at the screen. The dynamic has shifted. The axis of our world has tilted. If Grandpa hadn't pressed play on that video that night, right there in front of the potato salad and the fine china, everyone would probably still think I was the crazy one, but he did press play, and for the first time in my life, the silence that followed wasn't mine, it was theirs. To understand the explosion, you have to understand the pressure cooker, and to understand the pressure cooker, you have to go back 6 months before the assault, to a humid Saturday afternoon in late May. It was Patricia's 50th birthday. The venue was my father's house in Maple Ridge, a sprawling suburban development where the lawns are manicured to within an inch of their lives, and the Homeowners Association sends you a fine if your trash can is visible from the street. Patricia called it a harmonious family barbecue. I called it a mandatory performance review where I was destined to fail. I had almost declined the invitation. My work at Northline was demanding, and I had a pile of user interviews to code over the weekend. But then the text from my father arrived. "It would mean a lot to her if you came. Lexi, please, just for a few hours." So, against every instinct screaming in my gut, I put on a floral dress that I knew Patricia would approve of, nothing too short, nothing too bright, and drove the 40 minutes to the house I used to call home. When I arrived, the driveway was already full. I parked down the street and walked up, carrying a bouquet of hydrangeas and a bottle of expensive Pinot Noir. Patricia met me at the door. She looked impeccable, as always, wearing a cream-colored linen dress that would have been a stain magnet for anyone else, but on her, it remained pristine. "Alexis," she said, offering me a cheek to air kiss. She did not hug me. We stopped hugging years ago. "You made it, and you are only 15 minutes late." "Traffic on the interstate was bad," I said, forcing a smile. "Happy birthday. Patricia, these are for you." She took the flowers and handed them off to a catering server without looking at them. Then, she leaned in close, her voice dropping to that hushed, conspiratorial register that always made my stomach tighten. "Listen, sweetie," she said, her hand resting lightly on my forearm. "We have some important friends from the church here today, and a few of Eli's business associates. Let's just keep it calm tonight, okay? Do not be too intense. I want the atmosphere to be soft, pleasant. Don't be yourself," was what she meant. "Don't laugh too loud. Don't have opinions. Just exist as background decoration." "I am always pleasant," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Of course you think you are," she said with a tight smile, then turned to greet a couple walking up the path behind me. I made my way to the backyard. It was a scene straight out of a catalog. Fairy lights were strung between the oak trees. Soft jazz was playing from hidden speakers, and the smell of expensive charcoal filled the air. But as I approached the long dining table set up on the patio, I saw the landscape of my evening laid out in porcelain and linen. Patricia sat at the head of the table. To her immediate right sat my father. To her immediate left sat Eli, her son. Next to Eli were his friends and the important church elders, and then, way down at the far end of the table, separated from the adults by a gap of empty chairs, was my place setting. I was seated next to the folding card table set up for the children. It was a petty, calculated humiliation. At 29 years old, a professional researcher with a master's degree, I was being told exactly where I ranked in this hierarchy. "Lexi!" The shout pierced the polite murmur of the party. A blur of pink tulle and dark curls slammed into my legs. It was Lily, my 9-year-old half-sister. She was the only thing in this house that felt real. She had Thomas's eyes, but she had my energy. She was vibrating with excitement, holding a plastic wand. "Hey, Lil Bit," I said, crouching down to hug her. She smelled like sunscreen and grape soda. "I like the dress." "Mom says it is too puffy, but I feel like a cupcake," Lily shouted, laughing a laugh that was too big for her small body. It was a Sanders laugh. It was my laugh. I felt a surge of warmth, followed immediately by a pang of fear. I knew that laugh. I knew the cost of that laugh in this house. I squeezed her tight. "You look like a perfect cupcake." We sat down to eat as the sun began to dip below the fence line. The tension at the table was a physical weight, heavy and suffocating. Patricia held court, directing the conversation like a conductor. "We are just so proud of Eli," Patricia announced, beaming at her son. Eli was leaning back in his chair, swirling a glass of whiskey, looking every bit the successful young professional in his fitted polo shirt. "He just closed on his third property this month. He is practically running that agency already." "It was a duplex," Eli said, feigning modesty but soaking up the attention. "Nothing major, just helping a young couple find their start." "Nonsense," Patricia insisted. "It takes a special kind of person to handle negotiations like that, a people person, someone who knows how to connect." She turned her gaze down the table toward me, her eyes hardening slightly. "Not everyone has those social skills. Alexis, how is your computer thing going?" The table went quiet. All eyes turned to me. "It is going well," I said, taking a sip of water. "I am actually leading a new study on accessibility in banking apps. We are trying to make it easier for the visually impaired to manage their finances." Patricia wrinkled her nose. "It sounds so tedious, just staring at screens all day, watching people click mouses. I do not know how you do it. I suppose it suits you. Though, you always did prefer being in your head rather than dealing with real people." "It is actually all about people," I tried to explain. though I knew it was futile. It is psychology. We analyze behavior to, well, as long as it pays the rent on that apartment of yours, she interrupted, effectively dismissing my entire career with a wave of her hand. I just worry you are too isolated out there in Aurora Heights. I love my apartment, I said. She has the best laugh, though. The voice came from Mrs. Cortez, the next-door neighbor who had been invited out of obligation. She was a kind, elderly woman who lived on the other side of the fence. She smiled at me warmly. I heard you laughing with Lily earlier. Alexis, it sounded like bells. It is so nice to hear some life over here. Usually, this house is as quiet as a library. The compliment hung in the air like a lead balloon. Patricia's smile froze. Her eyes darted to Mrs. Cortez, then to me. Yes, well, Patricia said, her voice dripping with ice. Alexis has never really grasped the concept of an inside voice since 1994. We try to be considerate of the neighbors. Mrs. Cortez, we value decorum. Mrs. Cortez looked confused, sensing the hostility but not understanding the source. Oh, it was not loud. Dear, it was joyful. Joy needs boundaries too, Patricia said sharply, ending the subject. She pivoted the conversation immediately, launching into a story about the early days of her marriage to my father. This was one of her favorite pastimes, rewriting history to center herself as the martyr who salvaged a broken family. When I came into this house, Patricia said, her hand resting on Thomas's shoulder, it was just chaos, absolute chaos. Thomas was trying his best, bless his heart. But a man cannot raise a teenage girl alone. The house was a mess. There was no schedule, no structure. I stepped in when nobody else was willing to carry that burden. My grip on my fork tightened until my knuckles turned white. That is not true, I said. My voice was not loud, but it was firm. Patricia stopped mid-sentence. She looked at me with wide, innocent eyes. Excuse me? The house was not a mess, I said, looking at my father. And Dad was not alone. I was 18. I cooked dinner every night. I did the laundry. I made sure Dad took his blood pressure medication. We were grieving. Patricia, we were not broken. We were just sad. Oh, Alexis, Patricia sighed, looking around the table as if to say, see what I have to deal with? You remember things with such a dramatic filter. You were a child. You were traumatized. You could barely take care of yourself, let alone a house. I took care of him for 2 years, I insisted. I looked at my father, begging him to validate me, begging him to say, yes, she did. She stepped up when her mother died. Thomas looked at his plate. He pushed a piece of steak around with his fork. Then, he looked up at me, his eyes pleading for silence. Let it go, Alexis, he mumbled. Patricia is just telling a story. Do not make it a thing. The betrayal stung worse than the insult. He was rewriting me too. I sat back, defeated, and took a long drink of wine. Down at the kids' table, Lily had finished eating and was getting restless. She pulled out her iPad and started doing a TikTok dance she had learned. It was one of those silly, arm-flailing dances that kids do. She was hopping around near the grill, which was still cooling down but definitely hot to the touch. Patricia was deep in conversation with a church elder, ignoring her daughter entirely. Lily spun around, her foot slipping on the grass, and she stumbled backward, dangerously close to the metal hood of the grill. Whoa, I said, jumping up from my chair. I caught Lily by the arm just before she brushed against the hot metal. Careful, Lil bit, that is hot. Lily giggled, oblivious to the danger. Did you see my moves? I am going to be famous. You are going to be famous with a burn scar if you are not careful, I said, smiling to soften the warning. Hey, why don't we move this show to the grass? The lighting is better over there anyway. Alexis! Patricia's voice cracked like a whip. I turned. She was glaring at me. Stop getting her all riled up, Patricia snapped. She was sitting quietly until you started interfering. You are making her hyper, always so loud, always needing to be the center of attention. I stared at her. She almost fell into the grill. Patricia, I was moving her to safety. You were making a scene, she countered. Sit down. I guided Lily to the grass, whispering for her to stay away from the patio, and returned to my seat. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. A few minutes later, the atmosphere shifted again. Carson, one of Eli's friends from college who had been drinking steadily since 4 o'clock, leaned back in his chair and looked at me. You know, Carson said, slurring slightly, you are actually funny. Alexis, Eli always said you were a drag, but you are practically the only person at this table with a pulse. You should come out with us next weekend. We are going to that karaoke bar downtown. It was a clumsy compliment, but it was the first kind thing anyone had said to me besides Mrs. Cortez. I might take you up on that, I said, managing a genuine smile. I do a terrible rendition of Madonna, but I am enthusiastic. Patricia let out a sharp, cruel laugh. It was a sound devoid of humor. Oh, Carson, do not encourage her, she said loud enough for the entire table to hear. She thinks she is still in a sorority. Alexis, honestly, you are nearly 30 years old. Karaoke bars? That is why you are still single. Men want a woman who knows how to be a wife, not a party girl who thinks she is the main character. The table went silent. This was not passive-aggressive. This was a direct shot to the chest. It was an attack on my womanhood, my maturity, and my worth, delivered in front of strangers and family alike. Something inside me snapped, not the loud, explosive snap she wanted, but a cold, hard fracture. I placed my wineglass down on the table. I looked her dead in the eye. I am single because I have standards. Patricia, I said, my voice steady, projecting clearly to everyone at the table. And I would rather be alone for the rest of my life than perform a role for a man who requires me to make myself small so his ego can feel big. And frankly, I am tired of being treated like a child in a house where I'm the only one acting like an adult. You are the one causing a scene, not my laugh. You. The silence that followed was absolute. The crickets seemed to stop chirping. Eli's mouth hung open. My father looked like he wanted to dissolve into the patio pavers. Patricia's face turned a shade of red I had never seen before. Her jaw worked, grinding her teeth. She did not yell. She did not scream. She lowered her voice to a terrifying whisper. We will talk about this later, she hissed, when we do not have company. She stood up abruptly. Who wants cake? The guests murmured awkwardly, avoiding eye contact with me. The air was charged with static electricity, the kind that precedes a tornado. Everyone felt it. The facade of the harmonious family had cracked, and through the fissure, they had glimpsed the ugly machinery operating underneath. I sat there, my heart hammering against my ribs. I felt sick. I felt exposed. Then, I saw movement in my peripheral vision. Over in the corner of the yard, sitting in an Adirondack chair in the shadows, was Grandpa Walter. He had been silent the entire evening, nursing a single beer. He was looking right at me. His expression was unreadable to the others, but I knew him. He caught my eye. He did not smile. He simply nodded, a slow, deliberate nod. I saw that, the nod said. I see you. It was the only thing that kept me from running to my car right then and there. I did not know it then, but that nod was a promise. It was the first step in a plan that would take 6 months to mature. But in that moment, sitting at the end of the table near the children, I just felt the storm clouds gathering, waiting for the lightning to strike. The last guest drove away around 9:30 in the evening. The taillights of the final car faded down the winding suburban street, leaving the cul-de-sac in a heavy, humid silence. Inside the house, the air conditioning was humming, but it did nothing to cool the temperature in the kitchen. The performative happiness of the barbecue had evaporated the moment the front door clicked shut, replaced by the familiar suffocating tension that constituted our family dynamic. We were in the cleanup phase. My father, Thomas, was scraping leftover potato salad into Tupperware containers with the mechanical exhaustion of a man who just wants the day to be over. Eli was outside, collapsing the folding chairs and stacking them against the garage wall. Patricia was nowhere to be seen, presumably upstairs changing out of her hosting persona and into something more comfortable. leaving the grunt work to us. That left me in the kitchen with Lily. The 9-year-old was still buzzing with the sugar high of 3 cupcakes and the residual excitement of the party. She was standing on a step stool by the sink, helping by drying the plastic serving platters. She was humming a song, something pop and catchy that she had heard on the radio, and as she wiped the water droplets, the hum turned into singing. "I got the moves like Jagger. I got the moves like Jagger," she sang, her voice high and slightly off-key, echoing against the granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. I was loading the dishwasher, and for the first time all day, I felt my shoulders drop. It was just a kid singing. It was innocent. It was life. "You definitely got the moves. Lil bit," I said, chuckling as I slotted a plate into the rack. I joined in on the chorus, harmonizing with her. We were loud, but we were happy. For 10 seconds, the kitchen felt like a home instead of a museum where touching the exhibits was prohibited. Lily laughed, a bright, cascading sound that bounced off the walls, and she flicked a little bit of water at me from her drying towel. I laughed back, shielding my face. "Oh, you want to start a war? Is that it?" Then the door to the hallway swung open. It did not just open. It slammed against the wall with a force that rattled the spice rack. Patricia stood there. She had changed into a silk robe, her makeup removed, leaving her face pale and severe. She was pressing 2 fingers against her temple, her eyes squeezed shut, as if she were in physical agony. "For the love of God," she said, her voice trembling with restrained rage. "Do you ever stop? Do you ever just stop?" The laughter died instantly. Lily froze on her step stool, the towel clutching to her chest. I straightened up, the playful energy draining out of me like water from a cracked glass. "We were just cleaning up, Patricia," I said, keeping my voice level. Lily was singing. Patricia opened her eyes. They were cold, hard flint. She walked into the room, closing the distance between us. She ignored Lily completely and focused her laser sights on me. "She is 9 years old. Alexis, she is tired. She is hyperactive because you have been riling her up all evening with your intensity. And now, when I have a migraine splitting my head open, I have to come down here because you are screaming like banshees." "We were not screaming," I said. "We were singing. There is a difference." "There is no difference to me," she snapped. "It is noise. It is chaos. It is just you, needing to fill every room you enter with sound, because you cannot stand a moment of peace." My father looked up from the potato salad. He looked at Patricia, assessing her mood, then looked at the floor. He did not look at me. "Lexi," he said, his voice weary and thin, "just lower it down, okay? Patricia has a headache. Just finish up quietly." Something inside me broke. It was not a loud snap, but a quiet disintegration of the last restraint I had been holding on to. I was 29 years old. I paid my own taxes. I had my own life. And I was done being scolded like an unruly teenager in the house where I grew up. "No," I said. The word hung in the air. Patricia blinked, stunned. My father stopped scraping the bowl. "Excuse me?" Patricia said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I said no," I repeated, turning to face her fully. "I am not going to whisper. I am not going to tiptoe. Lily is a child. She is happy. She is singing in her own kitchen. You do not get to classify joy as noise just because you cannot control it." "You are a guest in this house," Patricia hissed, stepping closer, "and you are a rude one." "I am his daughter," I said, pointing at my father. "I am not a guest. I lived here before you did. I lived here when this house actually had laughter in it, before you turned it into a mausoleum where everyone is afraid to breathe too loud." "Alexis, stop," my father pleaded, but he stayed by the counter. He did not move between us. "Do not start this now." "Start what, Dad?" I asked, my voice rising. "The truth? You let her do this. For 10 years. You have let her edit us. You let her edit me. You let her tell you that your daughter is too much, too loud, too difficult. just because she hates that I remind you of Mom. The mention of my mother sucked the oxygen out of the room. Patricia's face twisted. Do not you dare bring Eleanor into this. I have done nothing but respect her memory. I raised you when she was gone. I took on the burden. You erased her, I shouted. I was not holding back anymore. The volume I had suppressed for a decade came pouring out. You took down her photos. You stopped us from talking about her. You rewrote the history of this family so that you are the savior and she is just a footnote. And you hate me because when I laugh, I sound like her. When I speak up, I sound like her. That is why you want me silent, because as long as I am loud, she is still here. You are hysterical, Patricia spat. You are unstable. This is exactly why we worry about you. Look at you. You are shaking. You are out of control. I am angry, I yelled. There is a difference between being unstable and being angry at people who treat you like garbage. Alexis, stop it, my father shouted, slamming the Tupperware onto the counter. You are upsetting Patricia. You are upsetting your sister. Just shut up. See? Patricia said, turning to Thomas, her hands thrown up in a gesture of helplessness. She does this every time. She comes here to destroy. She undermines my authority in my own home. She wants to turn Lily against me. I am trying to teach Lily that she does not have to be a statue to be loved, I shot back. Patricia turned on me then. The mask of the long-suffering stepmother slipped, revealing pure, unadulterated malice. Her eyes were wide, manic. You are loud again, she screamed. It was not an observation. It was a command. It was a justification. She lunged. It happened so fast that my brain could not process the sequence of events until it was over. One moment she was standing 3 feet away, and the next, she was on top of me. She shoved me, hard. Her hands slammed into my chest, driving me backward. My lower back collided with the edge of the granite countertop with a sickening thud that knocked the wind out of me. Pain radiated up my spine. Patricia, I gasped, my hands coming up instinctively to defend myself. She did not stop. She swung her right hand, open palm, but rigid, and connected with the side of my face. Crack. The sound was deafening in the small kitchen. It was the sound of flesh striking flesh, sharp and wet. My head snapped to the side. My ear rang with a high-pitched whine. The sting was immediate, a burning fire spreading across my cheekbone. Get out, she screamed, striking me again. This time a clumsy, closed fist blew to my shoulder as I tried to turn away. Get out of my house, you ungrateful, miserable brat. Mommy, stop. Lily's scream was a terrifying, high-pitched wail. I looked over through tearing eyes to see the 9-year-old pressed against the refrigerator, her hands over her ears, sobbing. The back door burst open. Eli ran in, breathless, having heard the commotion from the yard. He took in the scene, me pinned against the counter, holding my face, Patricia standing over me with her chest heaving, Lily screaming in the corner. He did not rush to me. He did not rush to his mother. Lily! Eli yelled. He crossed the room in 3 strides, grabbed the sobbing 9-year-old by the arm, and dragged her toward the hallway. Come on, upstairs, now. No, no, Lily shrieked, looking back at me with wide, terrified eyes. She heard Alexis. She heard her. Move, Eli shouted, yanking the child out of the room and kicking the door shut behind him. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Patricia's ragged breathing and the ringing in my ear. I touched my cheek. My skin felt hot, pulsing. I looked at my hand. No blood. But the shock was beginning to set in, making my knees tremble. I looked at my father. Thomas Sanders was standing exactly where he had been moments ago. He had not moved. He had not raised a hand to stop her. He was staring at me, his face pale, his eyes wide with panic. But the panic was not for me. Look what you did, he whispered. I stared at him, unable to comprehend the words. What I did? You provoked her, he shouted, his voice cracking. I told you to stop. I told you to be quiet. Why do you always have to push her? Look at this mess. You made her lose control." "She hit me, Dad," I said, my voice trembling. "She just hit me in the face." "Because you were screaming," he yelled back. "You were screaming in front of the child. Apologize to her, right now." I looked at Patricia. She had stepped back, leaning against the island, smoothing her robe. She was breathing hard, but the rage in her eyes was shifting into something else. Calculation. "I want her gone, Thomas," Patricia said, her voice shaking with a performance of fragility. "I do not feel safe. She is violent. She came at me." "I never touched you," I whispered. The gaslighting was happening in real time. The history was being rewritten before the ink was even dry. "You came at me," Patricia repeated, louder this time, testing the narrative. "You were screaming, and you lunged at me. I had to push you away." "That is a lie," I said. Suddenly, blue and red lights flashed against the kitchen window, cutting through the darkness of the backyard. A siren wailed, short and sharp, cutting off as a car pulled up to the curb. Mrs. Cortez. Through the open window above the sink, I could hear the distant slam of a car door and the crackle of a police radio. The scream. Lily's scream had traveled. The open windows. The neighbors had heard. "The police," Thomas said, his face draining of all color. "Oh God, the police are here." Patricia's eyes darted to the window, then to me, then to her own arm. In a split second, she changed. Her posture collapsed. She hunched her shoulders. She grabbed her left forearm with her right hand, squeezing it tight, wincing as if in excruciating pain. "She grabbed me," Patricia whispered to Thomas, her voice taking on a frantic, tearful edge. "Thomas, look, she grabbed my arm. She twisted it. I think it is bruising." "I did not touch you," I screamed, backing away toward the back door. "I never laid a hand on you." "She is out of control, Thomas," Patricia cried, tears now streaming down her face, tears that had not been there 10 seconds ago. "Look at her. She is hysterical. Tell them, Thomas, tell them she attacked me." My father looked at his wife, weeping and holding her arm. He looked at me, standing by the door, red-cheeked and horrified. He had to make a choice. He had to choose between the truth that would destroy his marriage or the lie that would save his peace. He looked at me, and his eyes hardened. "Just go outside, Alexis," he said coldly. "Wait for the officers, and do not say another word." I stumbled backward, fumbling for the handle of the sliding glass door. I nearly fell onto the patio. The humid night air hit me, but I was freezing. I was shivering so hard my teeth chattered. I walked around the side of the house toward the driveway. The police cruiser was parked at the curb, its lights rotating, casting long, dancing shadows against the perfectly manicured lawns of Maple Ridge. 2 officers were walking up the driveway, flashlights in hand. I stood there in the grass, hugging myself, feeling the throb of my cheekbone where she had slapped me. I saw Mrs. Cortez standing on her porch next door, clutching her robe, looking terrified. Inside the house, I knew what was happening. Patricia was crying. Thomas was comforting her. Eli was keeping Lily upstairs, silencing the only other witness. They were building the story. They were aligning their testimonies. I was alone. As the first officer shined his flashlight in my face, blinding me, I realized with a sinking, nauseating clarity that the truth did not matter. Not tonight. Tonight, I was the loud one. I was the intruder. I was the villain. "They are going to twist this," I thought, raising my hands as the officer approached, just like they always do. But I was wrong about one thing. I was not entirely alone. High up in the shadows of the porch next door, unnoticed by the police and unnoticed by me, a tiny red light blinked on the small, dark camera lens mounted under Mrs. Cortez's awning. It blinked once, twice, silently recording the darkness, waiting for the moment it would be asked to speak. The police officers did not arrest anyone that night, but they might as well have put me in handcuffs for the way they looked at me. There were 2 of them. A younger man with a buzz cut, and an older woman who looked like she had seen too many domestic disputes to care about the nuances of this one. They separated us immediately. The female officer walked me down the driveway, away from the house, while her partner went inside to take statements from Patricia and my father. I stood by the patrol car, my arms wrapped around myself, shivering in the humid night air. My face was throbbing. I could feel the heat radiating from my cheekbone where Patricia had struck me. "She hit me," I told the officer, my voice shaking. "I did not touch her. She got angry because I was singing with my sister, and she shoved me against the counter and slapped me." The officer shone her flashlight on my face. She squinted, looking for blood, for a cut, for a black eye. But a slap does not always leave a mark instantly. It leaves a red sting that fades into a dull ache before the bruise blooms hours later. "I do not see any marks, ma'am," she said, her voice flat. "Is your stepmother injured?" "No," I said, "because I did not hit her." But 10 minutes later, the male officer came out of the house. He walked over to his partner and lowered his voice, but I heard him clearly. "The wife is pretty shaken up. She says the daughter," he gestured at me, "came at her screaming, says she grabbed her arm and shoved her. The husband confirms it." My stomach dropped. My father confirmed it. "That is a lie," I shouted, stepping forward. "My father is lying because he is afraid of her." "Ma'am, you need to lower your voice," the female officer said, her hand resting near her belt. "We have 3 witnesses inside who say you were the aggressor. We have a homeowner who wants you off the property." They did not take a report from me. They did not ask for my side of the story beyond the first denial. They simply told me that if I did not get in my car and leave immediately, they would have to detain me for disturbing the peace. As I walked to my car, my father came out onto the porch. He did not cross the lawn. He stood under the yellow light of the porch lamp, looking old and defeated. "Dad," I called out, my hand on the door handle. "Do not come back, Alexis," he said, his voice carried across the quiet lawn. "Not until you learn to control yourself. I cannot have this violence around Lily." I drove home in a blur of tears, navigating the highway through a tunnel of vision. When I got to my apartment in Aurora Heights, I collapsed onto my bed without taking off my clothes. I stared at the ceiling, waiting for the morning, hoping that maybe, just maybe, daylight would bring some sanity back to the situation. I was wrong. Daylight brought the digital execution. I woke up at 7 o'clock to a phone that was vibrating so hard it was nearly dancing off the nightstand. I had 14 text messages, 5 missed calls, and over 30 notifications from Facebook and Instagram. My heart hammered against my ribs as I unlocked the screen. The first notification was a tag. Patricia Hale added a new photo. I clicked it. It opened the Facebook app, and there it was. A wall of text, carefully formatted with heartbreak emojis, posted at 6:30 in the morning. It breaks a mother's heart when the love you give is returned with violence. The post began. "I have tried for 10 years. Lord knows I have tried to be a mother, a friend, and a safe harbor. But mental health is a real battle, and sometimes people we love refuse to get the help they need." I felt the bile rise in my throat as I read on. "Last night, we had a terrifying incident in our home. My stepdaughter, Alexis, had an episode. She was screaming at me in front of my 9-year-old, and when I asked her to please lower her voice for the child's sake, she became physical. She shoved me and threatened me in my own kitchen. I am shaken. I am bruised. But mostly, I am just sad. Please pray for our family, and pray for Alexis, that she finds the peace she so clearly lacks." Below the text was a photo. It was a close-up of Patricia's forearm. There was a faint, reddish indentation on the skin. I stared at it, confused for a second. Then I remembered. Earlier in the day, before the party started, Patricia had been carrying stacks of heavy plastic lawn chairs. She had complained about the edge of the chairs digging into her arm. That mark was a pressure mark from a lawn chair. But in the context of the caption, it looked like the aftermath of a struggle. I scrolled down to the comments. They were a landslide of sympathy. "Oh my goodness, Patricia, I am so sorry. You are a saint for putting up with this for so long. Praying for protection over you and Lily. Unbelievable that she would do that. I always thought she seemed a little off. Stay strong, sister. And then I saw my father's comment. Thomas Sanders. We have tried everything to help her manage her anger. We just want everyone to be safe. Thank you all for the support. My hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped the phone. He was doing it. He was publicly validating the lie. He was cementing the narrative that I was the abuser. I switched apps to Instagram. There, at the top of my feed, was a story from Eli. It was a black screen with white text, set to aggressive music. Some people are just toxic, Eli had written. You cannot save someone who wants to turn your house into a battlefield. By Felicia, family drama narcissist psychopath. My chest felt tight, like a belt was being cinched around my lungs. This was not just a family argument anymore. This was a campaign. I went to work because I did not know what else to do. I thought the office would be a sanctuary, a place where logic and data ruled, far away from the emotional swamp of my family. I sat at my desk at Northline, staring at a spreadsheet of user click-through rates, but the numbers swam before my eyes. Around 10 o'clock, Sarah, a colleague from the marketing department, walked past my cubicle. Sarah and I were Facebook friends. We had gone to happy hour a few times. She stopped. She did not smile. "Hey, Alexis," she said. Her voice was tentative, laced with a morbid curiosity. "Hey, Sarah," I said, trying to sound normal. I saw the post your mom put up," she said, fidgeting with her coffee cup. "Are you okay? It sounded pretty intense. I did not know you guys had, physical fights." The blood drained from my face. "Your mom. Not stepmother. Mom." "That is not what happened, Sarah," I said, my voice rising slightly in defense. "She is lying. She hit me." Sarah took a half step back. She looked uncomfortable, like she had accidentally stepped in something foul. "Right," she said, not believing me. "Well, I hope you guys work it out. Violence is never the answer, you know?" She walked away before I could respond. I sat there, stunned. It was already happening. The story had breached the containment of the suburbs and had infected my professional life. How many other people in the office had seen it? How many were whispering about the unstable researcher who beat up her mother? I went to the bathroom and locked myself in a stall. I pulled out my phone again. I could not let this stand. I had to defend myself. I went back to Patricia's post. It had over 100 likes now. I tapped the comment box. "This is a lie," I typed, my thumbs flying. "You hit me. You slapped me in the face because I was singing with Lily. Dad knows the truth. The mark on your arm is from the lawn chairs. Please stop lying to people." I hit post. I watched my comment appear at the bottom of the thread. I refreshed the page, waiting to see if anyone would ask for my side. When the page reloaded, my comment was gone. I tried to post again. An error message popped up. "You are unable to comment on this post." I went to her profile. Content not available. She had blocked me. She had deleted my defense and blocked me, leaving only her accusation and the hundreds of supportive comments visible to the world. I was gagged. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from my father. "Stop posting on her page. Alexis, you are making it worse. Do not make a scene on the internet. Just let things cool down and maybe we can talk in a few months." A few months. He was putting me in a timeout. He was telling me to accept the exile and the slander quietly. I felt a wave of despair so profound I thought I might throw up. I was completely isolated. They had the photos, they had the witnesses, they had the community, and they had the microphone. Then, my phone buzzed again. A notification from WhatsApp. It was a message from a number I did not recognize. I opened it. There was no text, just a voice memo. I held the phone to my ear, pressing the volume down low so no one in the bathroom could hear. "Lexi?" The voice was a whisper. It was Lily. "I am in the closet," the little girl whispered, her voice thick with tears. "I stole Eli's old iPad. I wanted to say I am sorry. I know you did not hit Mommy. Mommy hit you first. I saw it. I tried to tell Daddy, but Eli yelled at me and said I was remembering it wrong. He said I have a bad memory. But I remember. I am sorry. Lexi, please do not be mad at me. The message ended with a soft click. I sat on the closed toilet lid, clutching the phone to my chest, and sobbed. Silent, heaving sobs that shook my entire body. They were gaslighting a 9-year-old. They were rewriting her reality, just like they had rewritten mine. That was more painful than the slap. That was evil. I wiped my face with rough toilet paper and tried to compose myself. I had to save that message. I forwarded it to my work email, then saved it to my cloud drive. As I was washing my face at the sink, trying to make my eyes look less red, my phone rang. It was Grandpa Walter. I hesitated. Did he know? Had Patricia gotten to him too? Had she spun the web around the one person I had left? I answered. Hello? I saw the pictures, Walter said. His voice was not angry. It was gravelly and flat. My cousin sent me screenshots of what that woman posted. Grandpa, it is not true, I said, my voice cracking. I swear to you, I did not. I know, he interrupted. I know you didn't. Lexi, you don't have to convince me. I have known that woman for 10 years, and I have known you for 29. I know a snake when I see one, and I know my granddaughter. I leaned against the tiled wall, relief washing over me. Dad is backing her up. Everyone believes her. They are saying I am unstable. They are doing more than that, Walter said. They are painting over you. They are taking your name and turning it into a warning label. This has gone beyond a family spat. Kid, this is a character assassination. And your father. He paused, and I heard him exhale a long, rattling breath. Your father has made his choice. He chose the easy life over the honest one. What do? I asked. I tried to comment, but she blocked me. Good, Walter said. Stop talking to them. Stop commenting. Do not send texts. Do not call. Anything you say right now, they will twist. If you get angry, they will say, see, she is angry. If you cry, they will say, see, she is unstable. The only move you have right now is silence. But they are winning, I whispered. They are making noise, Walter corrected. That is not winning. Listen to me. I am going to make some calls. I need you to document everything. Save that post. Save the text from your dad. Save Eli's little picture show. Print them out. We are not going to fight them on Facebook. Alexis, we are going to fight them with facts. But you need to hold on. Can you do that? I think so, I said. You are not alone, Walter said, his voice fierce. I need you to remember that. You are not crazy, and you are not alone. Now go wash your face, go back to work, and be the professional I know you are. Let them think they buried you. They forgot you are a seed. I hung up. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were swollen, and the left side of my face was slightly puffy. But Grandpa was right. They wanted a reaction. They wanted the explosion. I would not give it to them. I would give them silence. And in the silence, I would sharpen my knife. Grandpa Walter became my project manager. In the days following the assault, while I was still navigating the fog of shock and betrayal, he was the one who kept my feet on the ground. He did not offer platitudes. He offered instructions. Take pictures of your face, he told me over the phone, his voice grueling and pragmatic. I know the mark is fading. Alexis, I do not care. Take a picture in the morning light. Take a picture of your shoulder. Date them. Save them to a cloud drive where nobody else has the password. It felt grotesque to stand in my bathroom, tilting my head to catch the harsh fluorescent light on my cheekbone. The redness had dulled to a sickly yellow-green bruise, faint but undeniable. I took the photos. Then I sat at my computer and did what I did best. I researched. I compiled a timeline. I screenshotted every status update Patricia posted, every comment my father made, and every aggressive Instagram story Eli shared. I created a folder named The Incident and filled it with the digital debris of my family's implosion. I did not want to do it. I wanted to crawl under my duvet and sleep until the world forgot who Alexis Sanders was. But Walter insisted I meet with Isabel Kramer. Isabel was a family law attorney who specialized in defamation cases. Her office was in downtown Denver, a sleek, glass-walled space that felt 1,000,000 miles away from the emotional humidity of Maple Ridge. I sat in her leather chair, feeling like an imposter. People like me did not sue their families. People like me just swallowed the hurt and moved on. I feel ridiculous, I admitted, staring at my hands. It is just a family fight that got out of hand. Maybe I should just let it blow over. Isabel Kramer did not look up from the file I had sent her. She was a sharp-featured woman in her 50s, with glasses perched on the end of her nose. She scrolled through the screenshots on her tablet, her expression unreadable. "Alexis," she said, finally looking at me. "If your stepmother had slapped you and then stayed quiet, I would agree with you. But she did not stay quiet. She went public, and she used specific words." Isabel turned the tablet around to face me. She pointed to one of the comments Patricia had liked and replied to. "We are just so worried about her instability." Patricia had written, "We are afraid of what she might do next." "Unstable," Isabel read aloud. "Violent, threatening. These are not just insults. These are descriptors of character that suggest you are a danger to others. You work in user experience research, correct? You work with clients. You handle sensitive data. If a future employer Googles you and finds a narrative that you physically assaulted your stepmother and have a history of mental instability, do you think they will hire you?" A cold chill went down my spine. I had not thought about the long game. I was just trying to survive the week. "She is building a resume for you," Isabel continued, her voice clinically precise. "And it is a resume that says liability, a single angry post is venting, a coordinated campaign across multiple platforms involving false allegations of physical violence is defamation per se. She is not just venting. Alexis, she is branding you." I left her office with a retainer agreement in my bag, but did not sign it immediately. I still held on to a shred of hope. I thought, foolishly, that my father would wake up. I thought that if I just stayed silent, they would run out of steam. I was wrong. Silence did not stop them. It just gave them a blank canvas to paint whatever monster they wanted. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a message from a woman I barely knew. Her name was Brenda, a quiet lady who sang in the choir at my father's church. We were not friends, but she had always been kind to me. "I probably shouldn't send this," Brenda wrote, "but I thought you needed to know what is being said in the prayer group chat. This doesn't sit right with me." Attached was a screenshot from a private Facebook group titled Maple Ridge Ladies Prayer Circle. Patricia had posted a long, rambling request for prayer. "Please pray for wisdom," she wrote. "We are realizing now that the signs were there all along. There were incidents in high school that we swept under the rug because we wanted to protect her. But now that there is a child involved, we cannot ignore the history of outbursts. I am terrified to leave Lily alone in the house if she is around." I dropped my phone on my desk. The room spun. High school incidents? There were no high school incidents. I was a straight-A student who spent her weekends in the library or taking care of my grieving father. I had never been in a fight in my life. She was inventing a history of violence to justify her lie. And worse, she was weaponizing Lily by suggesting I was a danger to children. She was crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. Before I could even process the betrayal, an email notification popped up on my laptop. It was from Thomas Sanders. The subject line was simply, "Family Matters." I opened it, hoping for an apology, hoping for a lifeline. "Alexis, we have been discussing the situation. Given the events of the other night and your refusal to take accountability for your actions, we feel it is best if we set some boundaries. Until you are willing to admit to your behavior and seek professional counseling for your anger issues, we cannot allow you to see Lily. We have to put her safety first. I hope you understand that this comes from a place of love and concern. Dad." It was written like a corporate termination letter. We feel it is best. Accountability. Safety. He was not just taking her side anymore, he was adopting her language. He was using concern as a bludgeon to beat me into submission. If I wanted to see my sister, the only person in that house who actually loved me, I had to confess to a crime I did not commit. I had to agree that I was the crazy one. I sat in my office chair, tears streaming down my face, shaking with rage. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive over there and shake him. But I knew that was exactly what they wanted. They wanted the reaction. Then came the text from Eli. "Stop playing the victim to your friends," he texted. "Mom is a wreck because of you. You are destroying her health with your drama. If you try to come near the house or harass us, I will file for a restraining order. I am not kidding. You are toxic." I had not spoken to them in 5 days. I had not sent a single text. I was the one being harassed. Yet in their echo chamber, I was the aggressor. It was a masterclass in projection. But the final blow, the one that shattered my hesitation completely, came the following afternoon. I was sitting in a meeting with my project lead, discussing the timeline for a new banking app study, when the director of human resources knocked on the glass door. Her face was serious. "Alexis," she said, stepping in, "could I borrow you for a moment?" My stomach turned to lead. HR never pulled you out of meetings for good news. I followed her to her office. The walk felt like a march to the gallows. When we sat down, she turned her monitor slightly so I could not see it, but she held a printed piece of paper in her hand. "We received an email this morning through the General Inquiry Portal," she said, her voice gentle but firm. It was anonymous, sent from a burner account. The subject was safety concerns regarding Alexis Sanders. I felt the blood drain from my face. "What?" "The email alleges that you have severe anger management issues," she continued, choosing her words carefully. "It claims you were recently involved in a violent domestic assault. It included a link to a Facebook post." She slid the paper across the desk. It was a printout of Patricia's post, the photo of her arm, the comments calling me unstable. "Alexis," the HR director said, leaning forward, "we do not police our employees' private lives. However, this email was sent to the general inbox. The partners saw it. When allegations involve violence, especially given that we work with on-site client teams, we have to ask, is there any validity to this? Is there a police report?" "No," I said, my voice trembling. "There is no police report. I was not arrested. I was the one who was hit. Actually, my stepmother is trying to hurt me." "I see," she said. She looked at me with sympathy, but I could see the corporate wheels turning behind her eyes. She was assessing risk. She was wondering if I was a liability. "Look, for now, we are going to disregard this as a personal matter. But Alexis, if this continues, if we get more of these, or if clients are contacted, it becomes a workplace issue." I walked back to my desk in a daze. This was not just about family anymore. Patricia was trying to starve me out. She was trying to take my livelihood. She knew how much I loved my job, how hard I had worked to build a reputation as a calm, insightful researcher. She wanted to burn it all down. I grabbed my purse. I walked out of the building. I did not even tell my manager I was leaving. I drove straight to Isabel Kramer's office. I did not have an appointment. I told the receptionist it was an emergency. When Isabel saw me, she ushered me back. I told her everything. I showed her the screenshot from the prayer group. I showed her the email from my father. And then I told her about the meeting with HR. Isabel's face changed. The professional detachment vanished, replaced by the sharp, predatory focus of a lawyer who just found the smoking gun. "She contacted your employer?" Isabel asked. "Anonymously," I said, "but it linked to her post. Who else would do that?" "That changes everything," Isabel said, pulling a fresh legal pad toward her. "That moves us from simple defamation into tortious interference with business relations. She is actively trying to cause you financial damages. It is malicious, and it proves that this is a calculated campaign to destroy you, not just a grieving mother venting on Facebook." "She wants to ruin me," I whispered, "because I told her she erased my mother." "Then we stop her," Isabel said, But Alexis, you need to understand something. If we file this suit, there is no going back. Your father will be named as a co-defendant if he continues to support her lies. You will be suing your family. I thought about the email from Thomas. Safety concerns, counseling. He had known me for 29 years. He knew I had never raised a hand to anyone, and yet, he was willing to sign his name to her fiction because it was easier than fighting her. Isabel saw my hesitation. You are waiting for him to save you, she said softly. But in a legal case, his cowardice is just as damaging as her malice. It does not matter if he is scared of her. It matters that he is helping her destroy your life. I nodded slowly. The truth of it settled in my chest, heavy and cold like a stone. My father was gone. The man who had raised me had been replaced by Patricia's husband. Do it, I said. My phone rang. It was Grandpa Walter. I am with the lawyer, I told him, putting him on speaker. We are going to sue them, Grandpa. Good, Walter said. But listen, Lexi, I have been digging around in the attic. I found some old boxes from when your mom passed. What kind of boxes? Financial stuff, Walter said. Insurance papers. The original copy of her will. I have been comparing dates. There is something fishy about the timeline of when the cabin was transferred to the trust. The cabin? I asked. Dad always said it was put in the trust to save on taxes. Yeah, well, I am looking at a document here that says the cabin was supposed to transfer to you solely when you turned 25, Walter said. But that never happened, did it? No, I said. Patricia said it was better to keep it in the family trust so we could all use it. And yet, who uses it? Walter asked. Her relatives, her friends, and I'm looking at a modification to the trust signed 6 months after they got married. The signature on your mother's witness line. It looks shaky. Lexi, it does not look right. Isabel looked up, her eyebrows raised. If there is fraud in the estate management, she said, looking at the phone, that establishes a motive. Why would they want to discredit you? Why would they want to paint you as mentally unstable? Maybe to challenge your competency if you ever asked questions about the money. The pieces clicked together with a sickening sound. They are not just mad because I am loud, I said, my voice barely a whisper. They are scared because I am the beneficiary. I think we need to widen the scope of our investigation, Isabel said. Send me everything you found, Grandpa, I said. We are going after all of it. I picked up the pen. The retainer agreement lay on the desk in front of me. I looked at my signature line. For 10 years, I had signed birthday cards to Patricia. I had signed permission slips for Lily. I had signed the guest book at their parties. I pressed the pen to the paper and signed my name. Alexis Sanders. It was no longer the name of a victim. It was the name of a plaintiff. The shift from defense to offense happened in a dusty attic in Brookdale Springs and a glass-walled office in downtown Denver, while I was trying to keep my head above water at work, dodging pitying glances from colleagues and ignoring the vibrating notifications on my phone. Grandpa Walter and Isabel Kramer were quietly dismantling the foundation of Patricia's life. Isabel started with the public records. It is terrifying how much of a person's life is searchable if you know where to look and have a bar license, but the real treasure was buried under 20 years of accumulated memories in Grandpa's house. I remember the call. It was late, a Tuesday evening. I was sitting on my floor, surrounded by printed screenshots of Patricia's Facebook comments, trying to organize them by theme. Victimhood, fear, concern. My phone rang. I found the blue binder, Grandpa Walter said. His voice sounded thick, likely from the dust. Your mother was organized. Lexi, she kept everything. Carbon copies, original policies. It was all in a plastic tub behind the Christmas decorations. What is in it? I asked. A roadmap, he said. And it does not match the map we have been using. The next morning, I took a half-day off work and drove to Isabel's office. Grandpa had overnighted the documents to her. When I walked in, the conference table was covered in paper. On one side were the yellowed, crisp pages from my mother's binder. On the other were fresh printouts from the county clerk's office. Isabel looked like a hunter who had just spotted a blood trail. "Sit down, Alexis," she said. She did not waste time with pleasantries. "We need to talk about the Silver Pine Lake cabin." "The cabin?" I frowned. "That belongs to the family trust. Dad and Patricia manage it. We all use it. Well, they use it. I have not been invited up there in 3 years." "That is the current story," Isabel said. She slid a document toward me. It was my mother's last will and testament, dated 3 years before she died. "Read the bequest regarding real property." I scanned the legal jargon until I found the address. 2 Lakeview Drive, Silver Pine. "To my beloved daughter, Alexis Eleanor Sanders, I bequeath the property at Silver Pine Lake, to be held in trust until she reaches the age of 25, at which time full ownership and title shall transfer to her sole name." I stared at the paper. 25? I turned 25 4 years ago. Dad told me. He told me that because of estate taxes and maintenance costs, it was better to roll it into a general family trust. He said it would simplify things. "Simplify," Isabel repeated, the word dripping with skepticism. "That is a very convenient word for theft." She pulled another document from the pile. This one was newer, smoother. It was titled, "Amendment to the Sanders Living Trust." It was dated 6 months after my father married Patricia. "This document," Isabel explained, tapping the paper with a manicured nail, "claims to supersede the specific bequest in your mother's will. It argues that the assets were commingled for the benefit of the entire family unit. It effectively took the cabin out of your future and put it into their pockets." "But Dad signed it," I said, seeing his familiar scrawl at the bottom. "He agreed to it." "He did," Isabel said, "but look at the notary seal." I looked. Diane Mercer. Commission expires 2014. "Who is Diane Mercer?" I asked. "She was a paralegal who used to work at the firm your father used for his taxes," Isabel said. "I called her this morning. She lives in Boca Raton now. She has been retired for 8 years. Isabel leaned forward. "Diane told me she remembers Patricia. She remembers her because Patricia was, in her words, pushy. But Diane was very clear about one thing. She was in Florida visiting her grandchildren the week this document was supposedly notarized. She did not stamp this paper. Alexis, which means either someone stole her stamp or they forged the date to make it look legal." My mouth went dry. "They stole the cabin?" "It gets worse." Grandpa Walter's voice came through the speakerphone on the desk. I had not realized he was on the line. "Tell her about the money, Isabel." Isabel flipped over a stack of bank statements. "We pulled the property records for the cabin. 2 years ago, a home equity line of credit was opened against the property. The limit was $50,000. It is currently maxed out." "50,000?" I gasped. "What for? The roof is tin. It does not need replacing. It is a rustic cabin." "The money did not go to the roof," Isabel said. She laid out a spreadsheet she had compiled. "We traced the disbursements. $15,000 went to a global real estate institute. That is the fast-track course Eli took to get his license. $28,000 went to a dealership in Aurora." I closed my eyes. Patricia's white SUV, the one she said she bought with a small inheritance from an aunt. "She bought her car with my mother's house," I whispered. The realization made me physically nauseous. "And she paid for Eli's career with it. That is why she keeps saying the cabin is a burden. That is why she says it is just taxes and upkeep. She did not want me looking at the books." "Exactly," Grandpa Walter growled from the speaker. "Eleanor told me, explicitly, the cabin is for Alexis, no matter what. She knew Thomas was weak. She knew he would give away the farm to keep a woman happy. She tried to protect you from the grave, Lexi, and Patricia undid it with a fake stamp and a lie." I sat back in the chair, feeling the room tilt. For years, I had thought Patricia's animosity toward me was purely emotional. I thought she hated me because I was loud, because I was my mother's daughter, because I was an inconvenience to her perfect nuclear family picture. But it was not just hate, it was greed. "This changes the defamation case," Isabel said, her eyes sharp. "It gives us a motive. Why paint you as unstable? Why tell the church group you have a history of outbursts? Why email your employer suggesting you are violent?" "To discredit the witness," I said, the pieces clicking together like a terrifying puzzle. "Precisely," Isabel said. "If you ever found out about the fraud, if you ever asked why the title had not transferred at 25, they needed a defense. If you are the crazy, ungrateful daughter who has delusions and anger issues, then your accusations look like paranoia. She was pre-litigating against you. Alexis, she was destroying your credibility so that if you ever came for your inheritance, no one would believe you." "The loudness was never about volume," I said, my voice shaking. "It was about silencing me, literally silencing me." Isabel nodded. "She needed you to be the problem so she could be the victim. Victims do not steal. They survive. By framing you as the aggressor, she justifies her control over the finances. Alexis cannot be trusted with money. Look how unstable she is. It is a classic, albeit evil, strategy." Isabel then pulled out a thin file folder. "I also requested a pull of all police interactions at your father's address. Patricia claimed in her Facebook post that this was a shocking new behavior. But look at this." She slid a report across the table. It was dated 4 years ago. "Disturbance call. Verbal dispute." The officer noted here, Isabel pointed to a line, that the reporting party, Patricia Sanders, complained that her stepdaughter was disrespectful, but the responding officer noted, "No evidence of threat, simple family disagreement. She has called the cops on you before. Alexis, just for arguing, she has been trying to build a paper trail of you being a problem for years." "I remember that," I said. "I was home for Christmas. We argued about, God, I think it was about where to put the tree. She called the non-emergency line and said I was harassing her. I thought she was just being dramatic. I did not know she was building a file." "She plays the long game," Grandpa Walter said. "Patricia always plays the long game. She manages Thomas like he is an employee. I have watched her. She handles every piece of paper that comes into that house. Thomas does not read anything. He just signs where she points. 'Just explain it to me later, Patty,' he says. He is lazy, and she is predatory. It is a hell of a combination." I looked at the mountain of evidence, the forged will amendment, the stolen inheritance, the mortgage fraud, the defamation campaign. "So what do we do?" I asked. "Do we go to the police?" "Not yet," Isabel said. "The police are blunt instruments. Fraud is complex. If we go to them now, Patricia will claim it was a misunderstanding, or that your father authorized it verbally, and it will get bogged down in civil court for years. We need a confession, or at least, we need to corner them so tightly they cannot spin their way out." "We hit them on 2 fronts," Isabel continued, sketching a diagram on her notepad. "First, we file the defamation suit. We hit hard. We name Thomas and Patricia. That will panic them. It will force them to spend money on lawyers. Money they do not have because they spent it all on SUVs and real estate classes. Second, we prepare the petition to challenge the trust amendment and the accounting of the estate. But we do not file that one immediately. We hold it." "Why?" I asked. "Leverage," Isabel said grimly. "And because we need one final nail in the coffin regarding her character, we need to prove she is a liar, not just a thief." "I have an idea about that," Grandpa Walter said. "What kind of idea?" I asked. "I am going to host a dinner," Walter said. "I am going to tell them I want to talk about my will. I want to talk about distributing my assets early, because my health is failing." "Is your health failing?" I asked, panic rising in my chest. "I am fit as a fiddle," Walter scoffed. "But they do not know that greed is a powerful magnet. Lexi, if I tell them I am giving away money, Patricia will be there with bells on. She would not miss a chance to cash a check." "And then what?" "I went to the electronics store today," Walter said. "The young fellow there helped me out. I bought a little camera, a webcam. I think they call it high definition." "Grandpa," I said warningly, "what are you planning?" "I am putting it on the bookshelf in the dining room," he said. It looks right at the table. I'm going to hook it up to my laptop. I want to get everyone in the room. Thomas, Patricia, Eli, and those church busybodies she is always trying to impress. I want witnesses. Witnesses to what? To the truth, Walter said. Isabel, can you get me the video from the neighbor? The one from the night of the slap? I have the raw file from Mrs. Cortez, Isabel said. It is clear as day. You can see her lunge. You can see Alexis backing away. Good, Walter said. Send it to me. Put it on a thumb drive. I'm going to play a little movie for our guests. Grandpa, that is incredibly dramatic, I said, half shocked, half admiring. She likes drama, doesn't she? Walter said, his voice hard. She likes to perform. She likes to post stories for her audience. Well, I think it is time we gave her a real audience. I want to see her face when the lie dies. Alexis, and I want you to see it too. You have to be careful, Isabel warned. If you do this, it is nuclear. There is no coming back from this dinner. Good, I said. The word came out of my mouth before I even thought about it. I looked at the documents on the table, the proof that my mother's legacy had been cannibalized to feed Patricia's vanity. I do not want to come back. I want to burn the bridge so thoroughly that none of them can ever cross it again. Isabel nodded. She gathered the papers into a neat stack. Okay, she said. I will draft the complaint for defamation. I will prepare the forensic accounting report on the cabin. Walter, you set the table. Alexis, you just have to show up and keep your cool. I drove home that evening feeling different. For 6 months, I had felt like a ghost in my own life. Unseen, unheard, defined by others. I had walked around with a weight on my chest, apologizing for taking up space. But as I drove down the highway, watching the sun set over the Rockies, I realized I wasn't a ghost anymore. I was a storm gathering on the horizon. Patricia had spent 10 years telling everyone I was loud. She had no idea. She had absolutely no idea how loud the truth was going to be. The hardest part of a war is not the fighting. It is the waiting. It is the discipline of holding your fire while the enemy is strafing your position. Knowing that if you shoot back too early, you reveal your location and lose the advantage. For 3 weeks, Isabel Kramer became my general, and her glass-walled office was our war room. My instinct was to scream. Every time my phone buzzed with a screenshot from a concerned friend, showing yet another one of Patricia's passive-aggressive posts about dealing with toxic family members or praying for those lost in anger. I wanted to go nuclear. I wanted to post the photos of my bruised face. I wanted to upload the bank statements showing she bought her SUV with my mother's legacy. Not yet, Isabel would say, her voice cool and steady. We do not want a skirmish. Alexis, we want a slaughter. Let her talk. Let her dig the hole so deep she can never climb out. So we built the timeline. It was a gruesome task. We printed out every status update, every comment, every time-stamped text message from the last 6 months. We pinned them to a corkboard in Isabel's conference room. What emerged was not just a picture of a family dispute. It was a clear chronological map of a calculated campaign to destroy my reputation. Then came the piece of evidence that turned my stomach. It was an audio file, sent to Isabel's encrypted email from an anonymous address. The subject line was simply, "From a friend at Grace Community Church." Isabel played it for me on a Tuesday afternoon. The audio was slightly muffled, recorded perhaps from a phone sitting in a purse or a pocket, but the voices were unmistakable. It was the ambient chatter of a women's small group, the clinking of china, the murmur of agreement. And then, Patricia's voice cut through the noise, soft and performing that terrifying sorrow she had perfected. "I just do not know what to do anymore," Patricia said on the recording. "We have tried therapy, we have tried boundaries, but when she looks at Lily, there is a look in her eyes. Ladies, it is dark. Last week, she told me that if she could not live in the house, maybe Lily shouldn't either. I am terrified she's going to hurt my little girl just to get back at me." Gasps from the other women. "Oh, Patricia, that is demonic," one voice said. I know, Patricia sighed. I sleep with my door locked now. I just have to protect my child from her obsession. I sat in the leather chair, my hands gripping the armrest so hard my fingernails threatened to snap. She is accusing me of threatening a child, I whispered, my voice trembling with rage. I would die for Lily. She knows that. She is using my love for my sister to paint me as a monster. This is actionable, Isabel said, her eyes cold. This goes beyond vague Facebook posts. She is accusing you of criminal intent to a third party. That is slander per se. That afternoon, Isabel sent the cease and desist letters. They were not polite requests. They were legal cannon shots. One for Patricia, one for Thomas, one for Eli. The letters demanded an immediate retraction of all false statements, a preservation of all digital communications, and a notice that litigation for defamation and tortious interference was imminent. I expected silence. I expected fear. Instead, Patricia doubled down. 12 hours after the letters were delivered via courier, Patricia posted a picture of a stormy sky on Facebook. It is sad when people use the legal system to bully victims into silence, she wrote. Money can buy lawyers, but it cannot buy the truth. I will not be intimidated for protecting my family that will out David and Goliath. The comments flooded in. Stay strong. Patricia, we are behind you. Don't let them silence you. She is unbelievable, I said to Grandpa Walter on the phone that night. She just violated a legal warning in public, and she is getting likes for it. She is arrogant, Walter said. She thinks she is the smartest person in the room because she has been controlling the narrative for 10 years. She thinks the cease and desist is a bluff. She thinks you are still the scared little girl who hides in the kitchen. I wrote a post, I admitted. I wrote out everything. The abuse, the theft, the lies. I want to hit send. Grandpa, I want to burn it all down right now. Save the draft, Walter commanded. Do not post it. If you post it now, it becomes a he said, she said online brawl. People will pick sides based on who they like better, not on facts. We need to get them in a room. We need to get them on record when they think they are safe. How? I asked. They will never talk to me. They won't talk to you, Walter said, a dry chuckle rattling in his chest. But they will talk to my money. 2 days later, Walter played his card. He sent a formal invitation to the family group chat, the one I had been removed from, but which he forwarded to me. Family, he wrote, my health has not been what it used to be lately. I have been doing a lot of thinking about the estate and the future. I want to host a dinner at my place in Brookdale Springs this Saturday. I have invited the Millers and the Hendersons from church as well, as I want witnesses for what I intend to propose regarding the early distribution of my assets. It is time to settle things while I am still lucid. It was a trap, baited with the one thing Patricia loved more than her reputation, greed. The phrase early distribution of assets was like blood in the water. Walter knew that Patricia was currently cash poor. The investigation into the cabin revealed she was maxing out credit cards to keep up appearances. She needed a windfall. The RSVP came back within 20 minutes. We will be there. Dad, so glad you're finally being practical, my father wrote. The stage was set, but the preparation was grueling. I drove to Isabel's office the day before the dinner. The atmosphere was tense. Isabel handed me a small black device, no larger than a stick of gum. This is a digital recorder, she said. It has a 12-hour battery life. I want you to tape it to the inside of your purse, or pin it inside your jacket pocket. Colorado is a one-party consent state. As long as you are part of the conversation, you can record it legally. I took the device. It felt heavy, not in weight, but in significance. I feel like a spy. You are a litigant gathering evidence, Isabel corrected. And Walter? He has set up the webcam, I said. He bought a Logitech Streamcam. He put it on the bookshelf between the encyclopedias. He tested the angle yesterday. It captures the entire dining table. He has it running directly to his laptop, which he is going to hide behind the buffet cabinet. Good, Isabel said. Then she dropped the second bomb. I had the process server deliver the official lawsuit papers this morning. I blinked. I thought we were waiting. We are waiting to file the petition regarding the trust fraud, Isabel said. But I wanted them to receive the defamation lawsuit before the dinner. I want them rattled. I want them walking into that house feeling defensive, angry, and desperate. Desperate people make mistakes. Desperate people say things they shouldn't. She was right. The reaction was immediate and volatile. My phone lit up with a text from Eli around 2 in the afternoon. "You psychotic bitch." The text read, "You are actually suing us? You are trying to bankrupt the family? Mom is crying her eyes out. You are a selfish, toxic parasite. If you show your face at Grandpa's, I will drag you out myself. I am going to expose every dirty secret you have." I screenshotted the text and sent it to the cloud. "Add it to the pile," I whispered to myself. But the next message broke my heart. It was from Lily's iPad. "Lexi, Mommy says you are trying to take our house away. She says you want to make us live on the street. Is that true? I thought you loved me." I stared at the screen, my vision blurring. Patricia was using a 9-year-old as a human shield. She was terrified that the lawsuit would expose the mortgage fraud on the cabin, so she was spinning it to Lily that I was the one trying to steal their home. I typed back, my fingers trembling. "Lily, look at me. That is not true. I love you more than anything. I am not trying to take your home. I am just trying to make sure nobody tells lies about me anymore. I promise you, you will always be safe. Do not believe anyone who tells you I do not love you." I put the phone down and put my head in my hands. This had to end. It had to end this weekend. Friday night, I drove out to Brookdale Springs to stay with Grandpa Walter. I needed to be there early. I needed to see the battlefield before the enemy arrived. Walter looked older than I remembered. The stress was wearing on him. His house, usually a cozy clutter of mechanical parts and old newspapers, was strangely tidy. The dining room table was set with a bizarre collection of plates, some fine china, some chipped everyday ware. "Why the mix?" I asked, touching a porcelain saucer. "Metaphor," Walter grunted. "Old and new, real and fake. Let them figure it out." On the sideboard, organized in neat, terrifying stacks, was the paperwork. Stack 1, the original last will and testament of Eleanor Sanders, yellowed and stiff. Stack 2, the fraudulent amendment, with the signature of a woman who was in Boca Raton when she supposedly signed it. Stack 3, the bank statements showing the transfers to the car dealership and the real estate school. Stack 4, the affidavit from Diane Mercer, swearing she never notarized the amendment. Stack 5, the screenshots of every lie Patricia had told online, and sitting on top of the pile, a small silver USB drive. "Is that it?" I asked, nodding at the drive. "That is the video from Mrs. Cortez," Walter said, "and the audio file from the church group. I merged them. It is quite a presentation." He walked over to the bookshelf. "Check the camera." I looked at the laptop hidden behind the buffet. The screen showed a wide-angle view of the room. It was crisp. It picked up the dust motes dancing in the afternoon light. It would pick up every expression, every flinch, every lie. "Grandpa," I said, turning to him, "are you sure about this? Once we do this, Dad is never going to forgive us." Walter sat down heavily in his armchair. He looked at his hands that had fixed engines and built fences for 50 years. "Your father forgave a woman for erasing his wife," Walter said softly. "He forgave her for abusing his daughter. He forgave himself for being a coward. I do not really care if he forgives me. Alexis, I care about whether I can look at myself in the mirror before I die. And right now, I can't. Not while they are stealing from you." He looked up at me, his eyes fierce. "We are doing this, for Eleanor, and for you." I slept fitfully that night in the guest room, dreaming of drowning in a lake while Patricia stood on the shore, filming it with her phone. Saturday evening arrived with a sky the color of a bruise. The air was thick and heavy. I dressed carefully. Black slacks, a white blouse, a blazer, armor. I pinned the digital recorder inside the inner pocket of my blazer and taped the microphone wire so it sat just below my collarbone. I checked the battery. Full. I checked the memory. Empty. Showtime, I whispered to the mirror. I went downstairs. Walter was in the kitchen, pulling a roast out of the oven. He looked calm, almost cheerful. The calm before the execution. At 6 o'clock, the cars began to arrive. I stood by the window and watched them pull in. The crossover white SUV that my mother's cabin had paid for, my father's sedan, Eli's truck, and then the 2 cars of the witnesses, the Millers and the Hendersons, the church friends Patricia had dragged along to ensure she had an audience for her performance as the dutiful daughter-in-law. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. My palms were sweating so much I had to wipe them on my pants. I had never been this scared in my life. Not even when she slapped me. That was physical pain. This was existential dread. But as I watched Patricia step out of the car, smoothing her skirt, checking her reflection in the window, putting on that mask of sweet, long-suffering piety, something shifted in me. I touched the recorder in my pocket. I looked at the hidden webcam lens blinking silently on the shelf. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the director, and they were walking onto my set. I walked to the front door, opened it, and stood there as they walked up the path. "Hello, Patricia?" I said. My voice did not shake. "Hello, Dad." Patricia stopped. She looked at me with a mixture of shock and loathing. She clearly hadn't expected me to be here. She thought I would be hiding in shame. "Alexis," she said, her voice dripping with fake concern for the benefit of the guests behind her. "I am surprised you came, given everything." "I wouldn't miss it," I said, stepping aside to let them in. "Grandpa has so much to tell us." I closed the door behind them, locking it with a solid thud. The trap was sprung. The gravel crunching under the tires of my sedan sounded like bones breaking. I pulled into the long, dirt driveway of Grandpa Walter's property in Brookdale Springs, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles were white. The sun was beginning to dip below the tree line, casting long, bruised shadows across the yard. It was a beautiful evening, the kind of golden hour that usually signals peace, but tonight it felt like the lighting for a horror movie. I was not the first to arrive. In fact, looking at the collection of vehicles parked haphazardly on the grass, I realized I was the last. The sight turned my stomach. There was the pristine white crossover SUV that Patricia drove, the one Isabel and I now knew was purchased with the equity stolen from my mother's cabin. It sat there gleaming in the twilight, a monument to her greed. Next to it was my father's aging sedan, looking small and dusty by comparison. Then there was Eli's oversized pickup truck, a vehicle he used mostly to transport his ego rather than any actual cargo. But it was the other 2 cars that made my breath hitch, a beige sedan belonging to the Millers and a silver hatchback belonging to the Hendersons. These were the pillars of my father's church. They were the people who ran the bake sales and the prayer circles. They were the audience Patricia had spent 10 years curating. Seeing their cars confirmed Grandpa's strategy. He had not just invited family, he had invited the court of public opinion. I checked the recorder taped inside my blazer one last time. The red light was covered, but I could feel the hum of the device against my ribs. I checked the time. 6 o'clock sharp. I stepped out of the car. The air smelled of pine needles and the slow-roasted beef Grandpa had been cooking all afternoon. I walked up the wooden steps to the porch, each footfall heavy. I opened the door and stepped into the lion's den. The atmosphere inside was suffocating. The house was small, a traditional log cabin with an open floor plan, and it felt crowded with 7 people standing in the living room. Grandpa Walter had transformed the dining area. He had pushed his small kitchen table against the larger dining table to create one long banquet-style arrangement. It was set with a strange, deliberate chaos. There were plates from my grandmother's fine wedding china sitting next to chipped ceramic bowls from Walmart. There were crystal goblets next to plastic tumblers. It looked like a timeline of the family history, the valuable and the cheap, the old and the new, all mixed together on a tablecloth that was starched so stiff it could stand up on its own. Patricia was in the center of the room. Of course, she was hugging Grandpa Walter when I walked in. She held him tight, her head resting on his shoulder in a display of affection that made my skin crawl. "Oh, Walter," she cooed, pulling back and smoothing his flannel shirt. "You look tired. You really should not have gone to all this trouble. We could have brought food. You know I am always happy to serve." "I am fine, Patricia," Walter said. His voice was dry, lacking its usual warmth. He did not smile. He pulled away from her grasp gently but firmly. I wanted to do this myself. Then, the room turned. Everyone noticed me standing in the doorway. The silence that fell was absolute. It was heavy and thick, laden with the unsaid accusations that had been flying across the internet for 3 weeks. Patricia turned to me. Her smile did not waver, but her eyes went cold. It was a look I knew well, a scanning, predatory gaze. She was checking for cracks. She was looking for shaking hands, red eyes, or a flushed face. She was looking for anything she could report back to her Facebook group as evidence of my instability. "Alexis," she said. She gave a curt nod, not moving toward me. "I am surprised you came, given the legal threats." "Grandpa invited me," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Hello, Patricia?" I looked at my father. Thomas Sanders was standing right next to her, his shoulder practically brushing hers. He looked gray. He looked like a man who was slowly shrinking. He saw me, met my eyes for a fraction of a second, and then immediately looked down at his shoes. He could not even look at me. He needed her permission to speak, and she had not given it. "Daddy!" The shout broke the tension like a glass dropping on the floor. Lily burst out from behind the sofa where she had been hiding. She ran across the room, her sneakers squeaking on the hardwood floor, and slammed into me. I dropped to my knees and caught her. She wrapped her small arms around my neck and squeezed with a ferocity that told me everything I needed to know about how scary her house had become. "I missed you, Lexi," she whispered into my hair. "Mommy said you were not coming. She said you were mad at us." "I am never mad at you, Lil Bit," I whispered back, fighting the sting of tears. "Never." I stood up, keeping her hand in mine. Patricia's face twitched. She hated this. She hated any evidence that her narrative was flawed. If I was a monster, why did the child run to me? "Lily, come here," Eli's voice boomed from the kitchen doorway. He strode over, looking every bit the aspiring real estate mogul in his blazer and jeans. He did not look at me. He grabbed Lily's other hand and pulled, not gently. "Let go, Eli," I said, tightening my grip. "Let the adults talk, Alexis," Eli sneered. He yanked Lily away from me with enough force that she stumbled. "Go sit with Mom. Stop bothering people." "She is not bothering anyone," I said, my voice rising a decibel. Patricia's eyes lit up. She pointed a finger at me. "See? There she goes. Starting already? Mrs. Miller and Mrs. Henderson exchanged a look. They were watching me with wide, fascinated eyes. To them, this was live theater. They had read the posts. They had prayed for the troubled stepdaughter. Now they were waiting for the explosion. Grandpa Walter stepped into the center of the room. He clapped his hands once. The sound was sharp, like a gunshot. "All right," Walter said. "That is enough. Everyone, take a seat. I have assigned spots." He pointed to the chairs. He placed Patricia and Thomas on one side, facing the wall with the bookshelf. He placed the Millers and Hendersons on the ends. He placed Eli next to Patricia, and he placed me on the other side, alone, but facing the room. We sat. There was no food on the table yet, just the empty, mismatched plates and the heavy silence. "Now," Walter said, remaining standing at the head of the table. He looked at each of us in turn, his gaze lingering on my father. "I know you are all wondering why I called this dinner. I know there is a roast in the oven that smells good, and I know you are hungry, but we are not going to eat yet." "Is everything okay, Dad?" Thomas asked, his voice raspy. "You mentioned your health." "My health is what it is," Walter said ambiguously. "When you get to be 82, you start thinking about what you leave behind, You start thinking about your name, about the truth. He paused, leaning his hands on the back of his chair. There has been a lot of talk lately about the Sanders family, Walter said. A lot of noise on the internet, a lot of stories being told about my granddaughter, Alexis. Patricia stiffened. She reached out and placed her hand over Thomas's hand on the table, squeezing it. Walter, she said, her voice taking on that sugary, condescending tone she used when she wanted to control a conversation. I really do not think this is the time or the place. We are here to have a nice family dinner. We do not need to rehash unpleasantness, especially not in front of our guests. She gestured to the Millers and Hendersons, using them as a shield. On the contrary, Walter said, if it is public enough to put on Facebook for 500 people to read, surely it is public enough to discuss at my dinner table with 6 people. Patricia's smile faltered. We were just asking for prayer. Walter, we are dealing with a difficult situation. We love Alexis, but we cannot ignore her behavior. Her behavior, Walter repeated. He looked at me. My heart was hammering against my ribs. This was the moment. I opened my mouth to defend myself. I wanted to scream that I was innocent. I wanted to list the dates and the times and the lies. I just want to say, I started. Walter held up a hand. No, Alexis. I stopped, stunned. The room went quiet. Patricia looked smug for a second, thinking Walter was silencing me. You have explained enough, Walter said, looking at me with a fierce, protective intensity. You have been explaining yourself for 10 years. You have defended yourself to your father, to your bosses, to the police. Tonight, you do not have to say a word. Tonight, I am going to speak. He turned away from the table and walked toward the corner of the room where an old television set sat on a wooden stand. Next to it, hidden partially by a vase of dried flowers, was his laptop. Patricia, Walter said over his shoulder, you mentioned in your post that Alexis was violent. You said she screamed at you. You said she attacked you while you were just trying to keep the peace. She did, Patricia said, her voice gaining confidence. She looked at the Millers, nodding earnestly. It was terrifying. She shoved me into the counter. I still have pain in my shoulder. And you, Walter said, turning to Thomas, you saw this? Thomas looked at the tablecloth. He rubbed his face with his hand. Dad, please, let's just eat. Did you see it, Thomas? Walter barked. Yes, Thomas whispered. I saw it. And you, Eli? She was crazy, Eli said, leaning back in his chair, crossing his arms. She was screaming like a banshee, totally lost it. And Lily? Walter asked. We all looked at Lily. She was sitting at the far end of the table, shrinking into her chair. She looked terrified. This is not appropriate, Patricia snapped, standing up halfway. Walter, stop it. You are scaring the child. Lily, baby, why don't you go into the living room and watch TV? This is boring adult talk. Sit down, Patricia, Walter said. His voice was not loud, but it had the weight of a sledgehammer. I will not have my daughter subjected to this, Patricia hissed. Lily, go. She can go, Walter said. But leave the door open. I want her to hear the truth, even if she does not see it. Lily scrambled off her chair and ran into the living room. We heard the television click on, but the volume was low. She was listening. I knew she was listening. Walter waited until Lily was settled. Then he turned back to the room. So we have 3 witnesses who say Alexis attacked Patricia, Walter said. And we have 1 witness, Alexis, who says she didn't. Usually, that is where it ends. It is your word against hers. And since you are the mother, and the church lady, and the victim, everyone believes you. Patricia smoothed her napkin. It is not about winning, Walter. It is about safety. Safety, Walter mused. He walked over to the laptop. He tapped a key. The television screen flickered to life. It was not a movie. It was a static image, a freeze frame. It was a grainy, black and white shot taken from a high angle. It showed a suburban backyard at night. There was a fence, a patio, and through the large, uncurtained window of a kitchen. You could see figures standing in the light. Patricia squinted at the screen. "What is this?" I recognized it instantly. The angle, the trellis on the left side of the frame, the specific way the light spilled onto the grass. It was the view from Mrs. Cortez's back porch. "Mrs. Cortez," I whispered. Patricia's head snapped toward me. "What?" "Mrs. Cortez is a paranoid woman," Walter said conversationally. "She had a break-in about 2 years ago. Someone stole a bicycle off her porch. So, she had her son install a very expensive, high-definition security camera system. It records 24 hours a day, it has a wide-angle lens, and unfortunately for you, Patricia, her back porch looks directly into your kitchen window." The color drained from Patricia's face so fast, it looked like a special effect. She gripped the edge of the table. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice pitching up. "This is an invasion of privacy. You cannot film into people's houses." "You can when the curtains are open and you are standing in plain view," Walter said. "And you can certainly use it when the neighbor voluntarily hands over the footage because she is tired of hearing you lie about the sweet girl she has watched grow up." Thomas looked up. His eyes were wide, panic setting in. "Dad, what is that?" "This," Walter said, pointing to the screen. "This is the night of the party. Thomas, this is 10 minutes after the guests left. This is the moment Alexis supposedly went crazy." Eli laughed nervously. "So what? It is a blurry video. You cannot see anything." "Oh, you can see everything," Walter said. "Technology is a wonderful thing. Mrs. Cortez has a 4K camera, and I have a very big screen." Isabel had done the editing. She had synced the audio from the internal recording, the one Mrs. Cortez's camera picked up from the open window, with the video feed. Patricia stood up fully now. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. "I am not doing this," she said. "This is sick. You are obsessed. Come on, Thomas, we are leaving." She grabbed Thomas's arm. He didn't move. He was staring at the screen, mesmerized by the frozen image of his own kitchen. "Thomas!" she shrieked. "Sit down. Patricia," Mr. Miller said. We all turned. The church elder, the man Patricia had spent years impressing, was looking at her with a cold, hard curiosity. He wasn't leaving. He wanted to see. "I think we should watch it," Mrs. Miller added quietly. "If Alexis is dangerous, as you say, surely the video will prove it." Patricia looked trapped. She looked at the door, then at the guests, then at the screen. If she ran now, she admitted guilt. If she stayed, she faced the truth. She sat down slowly, like her strings had been cut. Walter looked at me. He winked. It was a small, almost imperceptible gesture. "You told the world my granddaughter was a violent monster," Walter said to the room. "You told the police she shoved you. You told the church she was a threat to a child." He placed his finger on the spacebar of the laptop. "This is what our neighbors saw," Walter said, his voice dropping to a growl. "And this is what the internet has never seen." He pressed play. The footage was grainy, the high-contrast black and white typical of night vision security cameras, but the clarity was devastating. The angle from Mrs. Cortez's back porch looked diagonally across the fence line, cutting straight through the darkness and into the brightly lit stage of the Sanders family kitchen. We looked like actors in a silent film, except the audio feed that Grandpa Walter had synchronized was anything but silent. The sound of the argument hit the room like a physical blow. I said no. My voice on the recording was clear, but it was not the hysterical, shrieking tone Patricia had described in her posts. It was the voice of someone pushed to their limit. Then, Patricia's voice cut through the speakers. It was not the soft, melodic hum she used at church potlucks. It was a guttural, shrill scream that caused Mrs. Henderson to jump in her seat. "You are a guest in this house, and you are a rude one." On the screen, we saw the figures move. We saw me standing by the dishwasher. We saw Patricia pacing by the island, her body language aggressive, her arms flailing. We saw Lily sitting on the stool, looking back and forth between us like a spectator at a tennis match from hell. "You are loud again," Patricia screamed on the video. The violence happened in slow motion for me, but on the screen, it was shockingly fast. Patricia closed the distance between us in 2 strides. There was no hesitation. There was no defensive posture. She was the missile. We watched her shove me. We watched my body fly backward and collide with the granite counter. We watched my head snap back. Then came the slap. Whack! The sound was amplified by the speakers. It was a crisp, sickening noise. "Get out of my house!" Patricia screamed on the recording, striking me a second time on the shoulder. "Mommy, stop!" Lily's scream on the tape was high and piercing, a sound of pure terror. In the living room, the real Lily let out a small whimper, but she did not look away from the screen. She was watching her memories be validated in real time. The most damning part was not the hit, it was my reaction. Patricia had told the police, the church, and the entire internet that I had lunged at her. She had said I was out of control and physically threatening. But the video showed a different story. From the moment she shoved me, my hands never formed fists. I did not reach for her. I did not push back. My arms came up instantly to cover my face and my chest. I curled inward. I shrank. It was the universal body language of a victim trying to minimize the surface area available for impact. "Get out! Get out!" Patricia was still screaming on the tape. Then, Eli ran into the frame. We watched him drag Lily out. We watched my father stand there, frozen, doing absolutely nothing. And then came the moment that sucked the air out of the room. On the screen, we saw blue and red lights flash against the window. The faint wail of a siren drifted through the audio feed. Patricia froze. She looked at the window. She looked at me. And then, with the calculation of a seasoned actress hitting her mark, she grabbed her own left arm. She hunched over. She started to weep. She looked at Thomas and said, "Clear as a bell." She grabbed me. She twisted it. The video ended. The screen went black. The silence in Grandpa Walter's dining room was heavier than lead. It was a vacuum. No one moved. No one breathed. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the distant ticking of a clock on the wall. Mrs. Miller was staring at the blank screen with her mouth slightly open. Mrs. Henderson was looking at her hands. Her face flushed a deep, embarrassed red. They had clicked like on the post. They had commented, "Praying for you?" They had been accomplices to a lie. And now the proof of their foolishness was staring them in the face. Patricia was the first to speak. Her voice was high, thin, and trembling. That is edited," she stammered, pointing a shaking finger at the laptop. "You cut parts out. You did not show what happened before. She was threatening me with her eyes. You cannot see the tension in the room on a camera." "It is a continuous file. Patricia," Walter said. His voice was terrifyingly calm. "I have the raw data, I have the metadata, and I have a sworn affidavit from Mrs. Cortez stating that this footage has not been altered in any way." Patricia looked around the room, her eyes darting from face to face, looking for an ally. She looked at Eli. He was staring at the table, his jaw clenched tight. She looked at the Millers. They refused to meet her gaze. "Context," Patricia whispered, desperate now. "You are taking it out of context." Walter did not argue. He simply reached into a folder on the table and pulled out a stack of papers. He began to pass them down the table. "Here is a printout of your Facebook post from the morning of June 4th, Walter said, sliding a sheet to Mr. Miller. Highlighted is the sentence, "She lunged at me and shoved me into the wall." He slid another paper, and here is a still frame from the video at 21 hours, 14 minutes, and 10 seconds. Please show me where Alexis is lunging, because to me, it looks like she is cowering. He passed another sheet to Mrs. Henderson. Here is your comment. Patricia, where you told the prayer group that Alexis has a history of physical aggression. And here is the police report from that night where the officer notes, no visible injuries on reporting party, significant swelling on suspect's cheek. Paper after paper, lie after lie, laid side by side with the unblinking truth of the camera lens. Thomas Sanders was holding one of the still photos. His hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled against the tablecloth. He was staring at the image of his wife grabbing her own arm after the sirens were heard. He looked up slowly. His face was the color of ash. He looked at Patricia, not with fear this time, but with a dawning, horrified realization. "You," Thomas started, his voice cracking. He swallowed and tried again. "Did you know Mrs. Cortez had a camera?" Patricia blinked. "What?" "Did you know?" Thomas asked, his voice rising. "When you told the police she hit you, when you told me she twisted your arm, did you know there was a camera?" "Thomas, it does not matter," Patricia hissed. "She was hysterical. I was protecting our family." "It matters because you lied to me," Thomas shouted. It was the first time I had heard him raise his voice at her in 10 years. "I told the police I saw it. I backed you up. I sent my daughter away because you told me she hurt you. And you were faking it?" "I was not faking," Patricia shrieked. "I was in pain. Emotional pain is real. Thomas." "You grabbed your arm when you heard the siren," Thomas whispered, looking back at the photo. "You set the stage. You set me up." "Oh, she did more than set you up, Thomas," Grandpa Walter said. "She set you up to be an accessory to fraud." Walter turned back to his pile of documents. He pushed the video evidence aside and pulled out the yellowed, fragile pages of the original will. "We are done with the assault," Walter said. "Now we are going to talk about the theft." He held up the document. "This is the last will and testament of Eleanor Sanders, my daughter-in-law, your wife, Thomas, your mother, Alexis." He put on his reading glasses. Article 4, Section B. "I bequeath the cabin located at 1402 Lakeview Drive, Silver Pine Lake, to my daughter, Alexis Sanders. This property is to be held in trust until her 25th birthday, at which time full title and ownership shall transfer to her solely." Walter looked up. "Alexis is 29. She does not have the title. Why is that?" He answered his own question by holding up the second document, the crisp, white amendment. "This is the document you signed, Thomas," Walter said. "6 months after you married Patricia, it moves the cabin into the Sanders Family Trust, controlled by you and your wife. It claims to supersede the will for the sake of financial simplification." "We did it for taxes," Thomas mumbled, reverting to the script he had been fed. "Patricia said it would save us money." "Patricia said," Walter repeated mockingly. "Did Patricia also tell you that the notary who stamped this document, Diane Mercer, was retired and living in Florida when this was supposedly signed in Colorado?" The room gasped. Mrs. Miller put a hand to her mouth. "That is a lie," Patricia said quickly. "Diane came back to town. She did it as a favor." "I spoke to Diane yesterday," Walter said. "She says she has not seen you in 12 years. She says she never stamped this. She says her stamp went missing from her old office right before she moved, which makes this document a forgery, Patricia, and it makes using it to transfer a deed a felony." Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "But why?" Walter asked the room. "Why steal a dusty old cabin? Patricia always says it is a money pit. She tells everyone it costs a fortune in upkeep." Walter slapped a bank statement onto the table. "Because 2 years ago, a home equity line of credit was opened against that cabin for $50,000. He pointed at Eli. $15,000 to the Global Real Estate Institute. Tuition for Eli Hale." He pointed at Patricia. $28,000 to Aurora Motors. Payment in full for a white crossover SUV. "You bought your car with my mother's house?" I whispered. I knew it. I had seen the papers. But saying it out loud in front of them made it real. "You told me you bought it with an inheritance from your aunt." "I am part of this family," Patricia yelled, slamming her hand on the table. "I have taken care of you people for 10 years. I deserve that car. I deserve a life. Eleanor is dead. She does not need a cabin." "But Alexis does!" Walter roared. He stood up, leaning over the table. "It was left to her, and you stole it. You stole her inheritance to buy your son a career and yourself a luxury car. And then you went on Facebook and called her greedy and ungrateful because she asked to see the will. Patricia was breathing hard, her chest heaving. She looked at the Millers and the Hendersons. Their faces were stone. They were not looking at her with sympathy anymore. They were looking at her like she was a stranger. "And that is why you had to destroy her," Walter said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "That is why she had to be unstable. That is why she had to be violent. Because if Alexis is crazy, no one listens when she says the money is missing. If Alexis is a danger to the family, you can cut her off and keep the secrets buried." Walter picked up a final piece of paper. It was a screenshot of a text message. "You told the prayer group that Alexis was unsafe around children." Walter read, "You insinuated she was a predator. You took the one thing she loves, her little sister, and you used it as a weapon to silence her." At the mention of her name, Lily walked out of the living room. She stood in the doorway, holding a stuffed rabbit. Her eyes were red. "I heard you, Mommy," Lily said. Her voice was small, but in the silent room, it sounded like a shout. Patricia spun around. "Lily, go back inside." "I heard you screaming on the TV," Lily said, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You said Alexis hit you, but she didn't. I saw it. You hit her. Why did you lie?" "Lily, you do not understand," Patricia said, reaching for her. "Do not touch her," Eli said. It was the first time Eli had spoken. He was staring at the bank statement on the table, the one showing his tuition paid for by my mother's cabin. He looked sick. He looked like he realized that his entire career was built on a crime. "Mom," Eli said, his voice shaking. "Is that true? Did you forge the notary stamp?" "I did it for us," Patricia screamed, turning on her son. "I did it so you could have a future. Do you think your stepfather was going to pay for it? He is useless. I had to make things happen. I always have to make things happen." "So you stole it," Eli said, pulling away from her. "And then you made me lie to the police." "I protected you." "You made me an accomplice," Eli shouted. "Enough," Walter cut in. He looked at the wreckage of his family. He looked at the shattered alliances, the exposed lies, the naked greed. "I have not just shown this to you," Walter said, addressing the room. "I sent copies of the video, the audio, the bank statements, and the affidavit from Diane Mercer to Isabel Kramer." Patricia froze. "Who is Isabel Kramer?" "She is a very expensive, very aggressive lawyer," I said, speaking for the first time since the video played. "And she represents me." "You sued us?" Thomas asked, looking at me with hollow eyes. "Grandpa Walter sent the files," I said. "The lawsuit for defamation, fraud, and tortious interference is already in motion. We are not doing this to get an apology. Dad, we are doing this to get the truth on the public record." "You cannot sue your family," Patricia spat. "It is biblical." "Thou shalt not steal," Walter countered. "Thou shalt not bear false witness. You broke the commandments long before we broke the silence. Patricia." Walter looked at the Millers and the Hendersons. "You have seen the truth. You can go back to your church and tell them whatever you want. But know this, if I hear one more lie about my granddaughter, I will play this video on a projector on the side of my barn every Sunday morning until the whole town sees it." "Mrs. Miller stood up. She picked up her purse. She looked at Patricia. "I think we will be going," Mrs. Miller said coldly. "Patricia, please remove me from the prayer chain administrator role. I do not think you are fit to lead it." They walked out. The door closed with a finality that echoed in the silent house. Patricia stood alone at the table. Her audience was gone. Her script was burned. Her husband was looking at her with horror, her son with disgust, and her stepdaughter with a calm, terrifying resolve. She looked at me. For a second, I thought she might lunge again, but she didn't. She collapsed into her chair and put her head in her hands. The play was over, the lights were on, and there was nowhere left to hide. The dinner did not end with a polite folding of napkins. It ended with an explosion of movement that mirrored the violence we had just watched on the screen. For a moment after the video ended, Patricia sat frozen, the blue light of the laptop screen reflecting in her wide, terrified eyes. Then, the paralysis broke. She stood up so abruptly that her chair tipped over backward, crashing against the hardwood floor with a sound like a gunshot. "This is illegal!" she screamed, her voice cracking. She pointed a shaking finger at Grandpa Walter. "You cannot record people without their consent. I will sue you. I will sue all of you." "It is a one-party consent state for audio, Patricia," Walter said, his voice calm, immovable as a mountain. "And for the video, you were standing in front of an open window in plain view of a public space. You have no expectation of privacy when you are screaming at the neighbors. But go ahead, call a lawyer. I will hand him the raw footage myself." Patricia turned to Thomas. "We are leaving, now." My father looked at her. For the first time in my life, I saw hesitation in his obedience. He looked at the screen, where the freeze frame showed his wife feigning injury. He looked at me, the daughter he had exiled. Then he looked at the woman pulling on his arm. "Thomas!" she shrieked. "Get the keys!" Habit is a powerful drug, even with the truth staring him in the face. My father slumped his shoulders and reached into his pocket. He was a broken man, hollowed out by a decade of compliance. He would go with her, not because he believed her, but because he did not know how to exist without her directions. Eli was already at the door, his face pale. He looked like he was going to be sick. He had seen his tuition, his car, and his career revealed as the fruits of theft. He grabbed the handle, desperate to escape the suffocating weight of the truth. "Come on, Lily," Eli muttered, reaching for his sister. Lily was standing by the archway to the living room. She was clutching her stuffed rabbit so tight her knuckles were white. She looked at her mother, who was manic with rage. She looked at her father, who was staring at the floor. Then she looked at me. "Lily, let's go," Patricia snapped, marching toward the door. Lily did not move toward her mother. She turned and ran toward me. She collided with my legs, burying her face in my stomach. I dropped to my knees and wrapped my arms around her, smelling the strawberry shampoo she used, feeling the small, bird-like beat of her heart against my chest. "I know you did not hit Mommy," she whispered into my ear. Her voice was wet with tears. "I know you didn't. I told them." "I know, baby," I whispered back, holding her as tight as I dared. "I know you did. You are brave. You are so brave." "Lily!" Patricia shouted. She did not come over to pull her away. She refused to get close to me. "Eli, get your sister." Eli stepped forward. He looked at me, and for a second, I saw shame in his eyes. Genuine, deep shame. But he reached down and took Lily's arm. "Come on, Lil," he said softly. "We have to go." Lily let go of me. She looked at me one last time, her eyes wide and searching. Before Eli pulled her toward the door, I watched them leave. The heavy wooden door slammed shut, sealing the silence back inside the house. Grandpa Walter let out a long breath and sat down heavily in his chair. He looked 10 years older than he had an hour ago. "Well," he said, picking up his fork and stabbing a piece of cold roast beef. "At least the Millers saw it." In the weeks that followed, the silence I had lived with for so long was replaced by the deafening noise of legal machinery. Isabel Kramer did not hesitate. On Monday morning, she filed the lawsuit. We named Patricia Hale and Thomas Sanders as co-defendants in a civil suit for defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and tortious interference with business relations. We attached the video file, the audio recording from the church group, and the chain of Facebook posts as Exhibit A through Exhibit Z. At the same time, Isabel filed a petition in probate court to challenge the validity of the amendment to the Sanders Living Trust. We submitted the affidavit from Diane Mercer, the retired notary who swore she was in Florida when the document was signed. It was a shock and awe campaign. We hit them with everything, all at once. The initial response from their camp was bluster. Patricia hired a lawyer, a flashy guy from a billboard on the interstate, who sent us a letter claiming the video was contextually misleading and threatening a countersuit for harassment. Isabel read the letter and laughed. "He has not seen the video yet," she told me. "Patricia probably told him it was blurry. Wait until he watches it." 2 days later, their tone changed. We were called into a settlement conference. We sat on one side of a long mahogany table. Me, Isabel, and Grandpa Walter. On the other side sat Patricia, Thomas, and their lawyer. Patricia refused to look at me. She stared at a spot on the wall, her jaw set in a tight, angry line. My father looked like a ghost. He was gray-faced, unshaven, and shrinking into his suit. The mediator started to speak, but Isabel cut him off. "We are not here to haggle over numbers," Isabel said, sliding a flash drive across the table to Patricia's lawyer. "This is the raw footage from the neighbor's camera. It shows your client striking my client twice. It shows your client staging an injury, and it shows your client lying to the police. If we go to trial, I will play this on a 10-foot screen for a jury, and then I will call the notary who says your client forged a federal document." The lawyer picked up the drive. He looked at Patricia. He whispered something in her ear. Patricia shook her head violently. The lawyer whispered again, more urgently. Then, the focus turned to Thomas. "Mr. Sanders," Isabel said, turning her gaze on my father, "you signed the amendment transferring the cabin. You signed the loan documents for the equity line of credit. You are listed as the trustee." Thomas looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed. "I didn't read them," he whispered. "Excuse me?" Isabel asked. "I didn't read them," Thomas said, his voice cracking. "Patricia handled the paperwork. She told me it was to save taxes. She brought me the pages, showed me where to sign, and I signed them. I trusted her." "You trusted her," I said. It was the first time I had spoken. "You trusted her more than you trusted the woman who left you that house. You trusted her more than you trusted your own daughter." "I just wanted peace, Alexis," he said, a tear sliding down his cheek. "I just wanted everyone to get along." "That is not a defense, Thomas," Walter said from beside me. "That is negligence, and it cost your daughter her inheritance." The admission of negligence saved Thomas from criminal fraud charges, but it destroyed whatever was left of my respect for him. He was not the villain, perhaps, but his weakness had allowed the villain to thrive. He had traded my safety for his comfort. The negotiations lasted 4 hours. In the end, Patricia's lawyer knew they were dead in the water. The video was irrefutable. The notary fraud was a felony risk they did not want to test in court. We reached an agreement. First, the apology. I insisted it had to be public. Patricia and Thomas had to sign a joint statement, written by Isabel, retracting all allegations of violence or instability against me. They had to post it on their social media accounts and leave it up for 1 year. They had to send a copy to the church leadership and to Northline Insight Studio. Second, the restitution. The cabin at Silver Pine Lake was to be transferred immediately and solely into my name. The outstanding $50,000 loan, the money used for the car and Eli's school, was to be assumed by Patricia personally. She was banned from ever using the property as collateral again. Third, the damages. They agreed to pay legal fees and a settlement for emotional distress. It was not a fortune, but it was enough to hurt. It meant Patricia would have to sell the white SUV. When the papers were signed, Patricia stood up. She looked at me then, really looked at me, with a hatred so pure it was almost impressive. "You think you won," she hissed. "You tore this family apart over a dusty old shack." "I did not tear anything apart. Patricia," I said, standing to meet her gaze, "I just turned on the lights. You are the one who was afraid of what we would see." The fallout in Maple Ridge was slow and excruciating for her. The apology letter went up on a Tuesday. By Wednesday, the comments section was a war zone. People who had sent her prayers were now demanding explanations. The members of the prayer group felt manipulated. Mrs. Miller, true to her word, removed Patricia from the leadership team. It turns out, the image of the long-suffering, saintly stepmother is fragile. It requires constant maintenance. Once the crack appeared, the whole facade shattered. People started asking questions. They asked why she had lied about the assault. They asked why she had driven a car bought with her stepdaughter's inheritance. Patricia tried to spin it, claiming she was forced to sign the apology to stop the harassment, but the damage was done. She was no longer the queen bee. She was the woman who lied about being hit by her child. At Northline, the cloud over my head evaporated. I showed the settlement agreement to HR. They apologized profusely. They purged the anonymous complaint from my file and assured me that my job was secure. I walked through the office with my head high, no longer afraid of whispers. Grandpa Walter made one final move. He called his own lawyer and rewrote his will. "I am adding a clause," he told me, showing me the draft. "Anyone who contests Eleanor's original wishes, or who is found to have harassed you in any way, is automatically disinherited, and I am leaving the bulk of the estate to you." "Alexis." "Grandpa, you do not have to do that," I said. "I do not want the money." "It is not about the money," he said, closing the folder. "It is about giving you back your name. They tried to make Alexis Sanders mean crazy. I am making sure it means owner." 2 months after the settlement, I drove up to Silver Pine Lake. I went alone. I had the new deed in the glove compartment and a fresh set of keys in my pocket. The cabin sat nestled in the trees, looking exactly as I remembered it from childhood. Rustic, brown, with a wide porch facing the water. I unlocked the door. The air inside was stale, smelling of pine and neglect. Patricia had not been here in months. I walked through the rooms, reclaiming them. I touched the walls. I opened the curtains. I went to the closet in the master bedroom, the one Patricia had kept locked. I found the key on the ring and opened it. Inside were boxes, my mother's boxes. Patricia hadn't thrown them away. She had just hidden them. I pulled out a plastic bin and popped the lid. It was full of photo albums, pictures of my mother laughing, pictures of me as a baby, pictures of my father before he became a shadow. I took the box out to the porch. I sat on the wooden swing, watching the sun glitter on the water. I opened an album and found a picture of my mother mid-laugh, her head thrown back, her mouth wide open. I looked at it, and a bubble of emotion rose in my chest. It wasn't grief, it wasn't anger, it was relief. I started to laugh. It started as a chuckle, then grew into a belly laugh, loud and echoing. I laughed until my sides hurt. I laughed, and I did not cover my mouth. I did not look over my shoulder. I let the sound roll out over the lake, bouncing off the trees, filling the empty space. I was loud, and it was beautiful. I did not call my father. I did not unblock Patricia or Eli. I decided that forgiveness was not required for healing. Peace was enough. I kept a line of communication open with Grandpa Walter, and through him, I sent messages to Lily. I sent her birthday presents. I sent her letters telling her I loved her. I knew Patricia would try to intercept them, but Walter promised to hand-deliver them when he visited. I would wait for her. When she was 18, she would come find me, and I would be here, ready to tell her the whole story. That evening, as the sun set, turning the sky a brilliant, bruising purple, I took out my phone. I wrote one final post. I did not rant. I did not scream. I simply uploaded a photo of the cabin at sunset, and next to it, a scan of the official, signed apology from Patricia and Thomas. The caption was short. "The truth does not need to be shouted to be heard. It just needs to be seen. Today, I am home." I turned off my phone. I did not need to see the likes. I did not need to read the comments from people apologizing for doubting me or the silence from those who were too ashamed to speak. I realized then that I had spent 10 years trying to prove I wasn't crazy. I had been desperate for their validation, but sitting there, on my own porch, with my mother's name on the deed and my own voice ringing in the air, I knew I didn't need them to believe me. I believed me. My stepmother beat me because I was loud. My grandfather turned on the truth for everyone to see. The rest of my life is simply the way I choose to live in the silence she can no longer control. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed seeing the truth come to light, please let me know in the comments where you are listening from. I would love to hear your thoughts on how the family handled the fallout. Please consider subscribing to the channel Lila Revenge Stories, liking this video, and pressing the hype button to help this story reach more people who need to know they are not alone.